On a quiet Saturday evening in West Hollywood, an awful incident occurred inside an apartment just a few blocks from the busy city streets. Despite the calmness, no unusual sounds, no loud arguments or cries for help, but behind that door, a disagreement escalated into a serious situation. When police and firefighters finally entered the apartment, they were stunned by what they found, even experienced officers. What really happened that night? Kirtland Ma was born on December 24, 1979, in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the eastern part of Maricopa County. He was the youngest of two sons of Danny and Peggy Ma, a Chinese-American couple. Kirtland grew up in a loving and peaceful environment. He was a deeply cherished child, especially by his maternal grandparents, Wing Doi Jimmy and Ellen Lee. With his friendly demeanor and constant smile, he had a natural charm that endeared him to everyone, making his grandparents feel incredibly fortunate to have him as their grandson. Kirtland showed early academic potential in elementary school, but it was in high school that his passion for learning really blossomed. He was not only a talented student but also had a strong curiosity that drove him to seek knowledge beyond what was taught in classes. After regular school hours, he took advanced mathematics courses at another institution, aiming to push himself further. One day, while heading to one of these extra classes, he met a girl his age from a different school. Their brief conversation left a lasting impression. She was drawn to Kirtland's kindness and sense of humor, and he felt the same way. From that point on, they became very close. During their junior year, they both transferred to the same school in Phoenix. Soon after, she worked up the courage to confess her feelings for Kirtland, believing he was her soulmate. She shared her deep love for him, but Kirtland, although considerate, did not feel the same way. He viewed her more like a sister. This left she heartbroken, but eventually, she recognized the value of their friendship and chose to cherish it instead of dwelling on unrequited love. Meanwhile, Kirtland focused even more on his studies, which led him to excel academically and stand out among his peers. In 1997, Kirtland took a standardized school assessment test, an important exam in the U.S. used to evaluate students' reading, writing, and math skills, which is often crucial for university admissions. His score was nearly perfect, earning him the distinguished title of Presidential Scholar, an honor for the country's top students. Kirtland was dedicated to his studies, but he also believed in leading a balanced life, which led him to compete in tennis. He frequently participated in city tournaments, many hosted at local universities, highlighting his versatility and discipline. In 1998, Kirtland started a new chapter at Yale University, choosing to major in American Studies. As he adapted to campus life, he was assigned to a residential college and shared a room with a student named Michael. The two quickly became close friends. Michael was particularly impressed by Kirtland's constant kindness and selflessness. He was someone who offered help without expecting anything in return. Michael's impressions were spot on. Kirtland's calm demeanor, patience, and genuine kindness made him magnetic. He easily connected with others, not out of effort, but because it was part of his character. His fellow students at Yale quickly recognized his captivating personality, sharp intellect, and humble nature, leading them to respect and befriend him. As people got to know him better, many realized that he was a trusted confidant. Friends often turned to him for advice, and Kirtland never let them down. He showed his appreciation not through grand declarations but through thoughtful gestures. During trips to New York City, just a couple of hours away from campus, he would often return with small gifts for those he cared about. Although he and female friend no longer lived in the same city, their friendship never faded. In one of their many conversations, she asked him why he never spoke about dating women. Deep down, she believed his silence was a kind way of sparing her feelings, but she wasn't prepared for the answer Kirtland gave. In a moment of honesty, Kirtland shared a part of himself he had kept private. He simply wasn't attracted to women. He explained that he was gay. She, surprised but open-hearted, listened carefully. Although it saddened her to think that Kirtland hadn't felt safe sharing this sooner, that conversation, free of judgment and full of trust, marked a turning point. It allowed Kirtland to embrace his identity more freely. From that day forward, he confided in she about the men he was attracted to. After graduating in 2002, Kirtland pursued another dream, traveling the world. His first destination was China, where he taught English and later took part in a cultural exchange program. This experience led him to Spain, where he lived with a host family and immersed himself in a different culture. Those months abroad helped him gain clarity about his future. By 2004, Kirtland realized he wanted to become a doctor. Driven by a strong sense of purpose, he returned to Yale, this time attending its School of Medicine. He continued to excel academically, writing his medical thesis on how traditional Chinese medicine could be applied to treat HIV patients in Hong Kong. After earning his degree in 2008, Kirtland moved to Manhattan to start his emergency medicine residency. During this time, he volunteered with a team of about 40 local healthcare professionals dedicated to educating New York's LGBTQ community about the risks associated with illicit substance use and unsafe intimate relationships. Kirtland's dedication as a doctor shone through when he made an exceptional and precise diagnosis for a patient with a rare type of fish poisoning. This case was significant enough to be featured in an article in the New York Times. Outside of his medical career, Kirtland enjoyed a lively social life, attending various gatherings and events when his schedule permitted. It was during one of these social outings that he met Andre Davids. Born in 1977 and a native of New York, Andre was very close to his sister. Unlike Kirtland, who was outgoing, Andre was more introverted. At that time, Andre was undergoing medical treatment, but the details of his condition were kept private. What was known was that his treatment involved medication that could potentially interact dangerously with other substances. Despite their differing personalities, Kirtland and Andre quickly felt a strong attraction to each other. What began as a friendship soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. Even though Kirtland was open about many aspects of his life, he chose to keep his relationship with Andre private for a long time, even from his closest friends and family. By the time he completed his medical residency, he felt it was time to take a break from the pace of New York City. Longing to reconnect with his family, Kirtland returned to Arizona in July 2012. He temporarily moved in with his parents, Peggy and Danny. Grateful to be home again and the support of his loved ones, Kirtland shared his happiness on social media. Soon after, he began working at 2 hospitals in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Though miles apart, his bond with Andre remained strong. He also kept in touch with his friends in New York, often reuniting with them during visits, whether they came to Arizona or he traveled east. Eventually, Andre began accompanying him on these trips until, in 2013, he decided to move to Arizona permanently to be closer to Kirtland. That September, Kirtland posted a photo of the two of them together online, making their relationship public for the first time. The revelation surprised some friends, but they warmly welcomed Andre into their circle. They didn't just offer polite gestures, they genuinely tried to include him socially. However, from the outset, Andre seemed reluctant to connect. His jealousy toward Kirtland's friendships gradually became more noticeable over time. This possessiveness intensified, and he began asking Kirtland to avoid spending time with his friends. Kirtland, ever the optimist, remained calm. He didn't allow Andre's behavior to derail his own goals. He continued making plans with his friend, even organizing trips together. Rather than feel discouraged, Kirtland believed that a new environment might help their relationship. He dreamed of moving to a more open and accepting place for LGBT people, somewhere they could thrive as a couple. After giving it thoughtful consideration, California seemed like the perfect destination. He was excited by the idea and shared his vision with Andre, assuring him that they would embark on this new chapter together. Once they relocated, Kirtland began working at a hospital. Simultaneously, he looked forward to being more active in the LGBT community. California, with its vibrant culture and inclusivity, felt like the ideal place to do just that. True to his enthusiastic nature, the prospect energized him deeply. In February 2014, they rented an apartment in West Hollywood, a lively neighborhood known for its nightlife and diversity. Initially, only Andre moved in, as Kirtland had to make a trip to Japan. But upon returning to the US on March 24, Kirtland sensed immediately that the change in scenery had done little to repair what was broken. The tensions between them still lingered. For the first time, he seriously contemplated ending the relationship. On the afternoon of Saturday, March 29, 2014, after a restless night for Andre, who had used banned substances and barely slept, Kirtland decided it was finally time to have the difficult conversation they had avoided for too long. Calmly, he expressed his dissatisfaction with where things were heading and admitted that he was considering dating other people. Andre, unprepared, unwilling to accept the possibility of separation, refused outright. He also rejected any suggestion of an open relationship, insisting on exclusivity. The conversation quickly escalated into an argument as tensions flared until both men reached for kitchen knives. What began as a verbal exchange devolved into a physical struggle. Kirtland, in a moment of regained clarity, attempted to de-escalate the situation, but Andre, overtaken by rage, did not stop. In a violent outburst, he seized the weapon and stabbed Kirtland repeatedly until he collapsed, lifeless. Panicked and unsure of what to do next, Andre called his sister and told her they had a serious fight, but he withheld the horrifying truth of what had just happened. Alarmed by her brother's unstable behavior and fearing he might harm himself, Andre's sister immediately contacted the police, sharing all the information she had. Officers were dispatched to the address she provided to conduct a check. However, when no one responded at the door, they eventually left the scene. As the hours passed and she remained without news, Andre's sister called the police again. This time, officers returned to the apartment, accompanied by a team of firefighters. At 4:55 p.m. on Saturday, March 29, 2014, both teams entered an apartment in West Hollywood. Inside, they found a gruesome scene. Kirtland was on the kitchen floor after a violent attack. In the bathroom, Andre was in the tub, injured and holding a knife, threatening to take his own life. Next to him were a cell phone and a bottle of pills. A police officer quickly secured the knife, while the fire department helped lift Andre out of the tub. He was taken to a nearby hospital to treat injuries on his neck and wrists. Unfortunately, paramedics confirmed that they could do nothing for Kirtland, who was officially pronounced dead by the Los Angeles County coroner just before 7 p.m. The autopsy showed the extent of Kirtland's injuries. He had suffered 40 stab wounds from various sharp kitchen tools, was disemboweled, some organs were stuffed into the mouth, and pills were stuffed into the body cavity. From the outset, Andre Davids was identified as the main suspect. At the hospital, toxicology tests revealed multiple substances in his system. When detectives spoke with Andre in his hospital room, he did not refuse to answer their questions. Instead, he confessed to the murder and recounted the events leading up to it, expressing deep remorse and a wish to end his life. On Sunday, March 30, 2014, after further investigation, Andre was arrested at the West Hollywood Sheriff's Station. He was charged with murder involving a deadly weapon and held on a $1 million bail. He was then moved to the correctional facility in Los Angeles. News of Kirtland's murder spread quickly, dominating headlines and attracting significant media attention. Just a week later, a separate violent incident in the same apartment complex injured several people, causing widespread fear among residents. Many began to reassess their safety in the area. Andre's trial started in December 2015. He faced charges of voluntary manslaughter and second-degree murder. The distinction between these charges was crucial because California law required the prosecution to prove whether the crime involved express or implied malice, which impacted the potential sentence severity. Kirtland's family advocated for the most serious charge, which could lead to life imprisonment. In contrast, the defense argued that Andre's mental state was impaired by banned substance use and prescription medications. They pointed out that Andre had no prior history of violence and claimed that the killing occurred in a moment of intense emotional distress, a common argument for reducing charges in emotionally driven crimes. The jury considered various factors, including Kirtland's stated desire to end the relationship, which may have intensified Andre's emotional turmoil. On December 17, 2015, Andre Davids was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. His sentencing hearing took place on January 21, 2016, at the Los Angeles Superior Court. A particularly emotional moment occurred when Wayland, Massachusetts, the older brother of the victim Kirtland, addressed the court. He spoke directly to Andre, conveying his deep pain and anger over the loss of his brother in such a violent manner. He expressed a wish that the memory of the crime would torment Andre for the rest of his life. In California, involuntary manslaughter carries a sentence of 3 to 11 years. The judge decided to impose the maximum sentence of 11 years, along with an additional year for the use of a deadly weapon. Kirtland's family and many others in the community were deeply troubled by the verdict, believing the sentence to be too lenient given the brutality of the crime. Some even called for a retrial to seek a harsher punishment, but the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits a second trial for the same crime. Andre's legal team appealed the 12-year sentence, seeking a reduction. The appeal was heard on November 17, 2016, by a panel of 3 judges in California's 2nd District Court of Appeal. The defense argued for a mid-range sentence of 6 years. However, the deputy district attorney described the crime scene as one of the most horrific she had ever seen, which left the judges convinced of the crime's severity. In her closing statement, the deputy district attorney highlighted Andre's danger to society. Ultimately, the judges upheld the original sentence, agreeing that the nature of the crime warranted the maximum punishment allowed by law. The tragic death of Kirtland marked a profound loss for his family, friends, and the communities he touched. A gifted doctor and compassionate soul, Kirtland's journey from a cherished child in Scottsdale to a respected physician in West Hollywood was defined by kindness, intellect, and a commitment to helping others. His life, cut short by a violent act born of personal turmoil, left an indelible void. Andre David's conviction for voluntary manslaughter and 12-year sentence offered some measure of justice, but for many, it could not erase the pain of such a brutal crime.
On the morning of July 4th, 2011, the body of a woman was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts. A cyclist who was enjoying the scenery near a swampy area noticed something unusual and decided to investigate. To her shock, she discovered the lifeless body of a young girl lying in the grass and mud. It was clear that the girl had not drowned. Instead, she had suffered a brutal fate. There was a noticeable wound on her neck, and a bungee cord was entangled in her hair. The bystander, however, still in shock, called emergency services to report what she witnessed. When law enforcement arrived, they pulled the body out of the water and examined it before sending it for forensic analysis. Since the girl had only been in the water for a short time, her appearance had not changed much. Officers identified her as 18-year-old Lauren Astley, who had been reported missing the night before. Lauren did not come home or attend a meeting with her friends. CCTV footage showed her entering the shopping center, where she worked as a sales clerk at Tenna Mountain on July 3rd and leaving at 6:51 p.m. after her shift ended. At that time, she was on the phone with someone. Sadly, this was the last confirmed sighting of her, and she has not been heard from since. Malcolm Astley, Lauren's father, started to feel anxious because his daughter was always punctual and reliable. If she said she would be home at a specific time, she always did. She never changed her plans without a reason, and usually, she would inform him if she was going to be late. Understanding that something might have gone wrong, Malcolm quickly alerted the police about her disappearance. The police quickly began the search for Lauren. At the same time, her family and friends joined in to look for her. News of her disappearance spread rapidly through word of mouth among their acquaintances. Eventually, her car was discovered in a local beach parking lot. The windows were down, and her personal belongings, including a purse and a laptop, were left inside the car. However, Lauren was still missing, and it was uncertain where she might have gone after abandoning her vehicle in that condition. When Malcolm learned that his daughter's car had been found, he quickly drove to the location to search for her. He walked along the shoreline, using a flashlight to scan the water as if he might find her there. Soon after, Lauren's friends arrived, choosing to stay overnight at the site in hopes of being the first to see her. They spent the entire night searching the area, wondering where Lauren could have gone. It was hard for them to believe that the person they had been talking and laughing with just moments ago could simply vanish. Tragically, just 12 hours later, Lauren's body was discovered. The first person the officers contacted was her father. They shared the devastating news with him and asked him to come for identification. Malcolm struggled to accept that the girl on the pathologist's table was his daughter. However, once he composed himself, he officially recognized her. Before him lay his young and vibrant daughter, who had so much potential ahead of her. Heartbroken, he faced the painful reality and knew he had two important tasks: to inform his ex-wife about the tragedy and to find the person responsible for his daughter's death. When the devastating news reached the city, people were in disbelief. Friends and family collectively asserted that Lauren had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. The only person that some began to suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was mentioned cautiously, as everyone recognized his deep love for Lauren and believed he could never harm her. Nevertheless, the investigations proceeded. Lauren and Nathaniel were the envy of their entire high school. She was a petite, pretty brown girl who stood out for her energy and uniqueness, and he was a tall, ambitious soccer player adored by many girls. Although the two had known each other since childhood, they revealed their feelings later on. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a colorful romance with all the typical ups and downs. They fought and made up, broke up and got back together. Both had strong personalities, but they tried to cherish the bond that existed between them. At least, this was true for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child of Mary and Malcolm, which meant that both parents focused all their attention on her. Since they both worked as teachers, they instilled important values in her from an early age, the most significant being their desire for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, her parents divorced. However, this did not affect her upbringing. Both continued to care for her and support her in all their endeavors. Lauren was a remarkable young woman, constantly engaged in various activities that kept her busy. She was passionate about tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Additionally, she took part in her church choir, worked as a counselor at a children's camp. No school or town concert was complete without her involvement, and many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active, everywhere at once. Another aspect of Lauren's hobbies was her social activism. At the age of 12, she helped the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana, and returned to the area 2 more times for similar missions. With her big, kind heart, open to the world and people, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Those around her knew they could rely on her anytime for help or advice. Nathaniel attended high school with Lauren. He was a standout player on the school soccer team and showed great potential, dreaming of a future in sports. He was known as a diligent student in the life of the party, the eldest son of Beth and Toma Fujita. His family enjoyed prosperity and some fame in certain circles. His father was a renowned guitarist and a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and was known for his unconventional approach to life. Interestingly, Nathaniel and Lauren developed a romantic relationship after she interviewed Nathaniel's father for a school project. After that, she began visiting their home more often, and once they stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate, visit each other. In the beginning, the first 2 years of Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship were wonderful. They were both attractive and their bond attracted a lot of attention. They enjoyed many activities together, going out, playing sports, studying, and more. However, over time, their closeness started to become overwhelming. Nathaniel grew more controlling, refusing to let Lauren go out by herself and becoming jealous over small things. He often imagined threats that didn't exist and wanted all of her attention for himself, leading to frequent arguments. Despite these issues, Lauren never reported any physical abuse. Instead, their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster. Losing its sense of peace, this instability was uncomfortable for them both. Yet they struggled to regain the happy feelings they once had. As Lauren neared the end of her schooling, she started to consider her future. She made a list of the strengths and weaknesses of her relationship with Nathaniel and realized it was time to part ways. His behavior around her had changed, and her mother had unintentionally influenced her perception of their relationship, projecting her own ideas about a future with Nathaniel onto Lauren. Additionally, the upcoming college enrollment weighed heavily on her decision. Their paths were already separating. Lauren was applying to Elon University in North Carolina, while Nathaniel had received an invitation to play soccer at Trinity College in Connecticut. On April 1st, 2011, which was also her birthday, Lauren made a significant decision. She believed it was the right time to embrace changes and begin anew, as everyone had new relationships and activities to occupy their minds and help alleviate sadness. However, Nathaniel did not feel the same way. He experienced profound feelings of loss and loneliness. His enthusiasm for college had faded. He no longer engaged in practicing or socializing. Instead, he spent his days lying on the couch watching TV. Nathaniel slipped into a deep depression that became overwhelming for him. Everyone noticed that the once active, energetic young man had become withdrawn and depressed. He turned to alcohol and marijuana to escape his reality. It was difficult for Lauren to witness this change and to feel responsible for it. She sought advice from her friends on how to help him, but they all suggested that she should not interfere and instead give him the space to heal alone. They warned that her involvement could be seen as an attempt to fix him, which might make things worse. After graduation, Ashley's kindness and eagerness to help led to unexpected trouble. She and her friends organized a large party for about 150 people, held under a vast dome where everyone danced and had a good time. Nathaniel was among the guests, but he arrived quite drunk. When he saw Lauren dancing in the center of the dance floor, he attempted to talk to her. She politely asked him to leave her alone so he wouldn't ruin the party, explaining that they had already discussed everything before and that she didn't want to engage with him in his current state. Despite her request, he insisted on starting over the conversation. As time went on, Nathaniel's mood worsened, and he grew increasingly aggressive. Eventually, in a fit of anger, he punched a pole supporting the structure, causing it to shake and collapse, which ruined the celebration. The crowd was upset, wanted Nathaniel to leave the party. Later, Lauren approached her mother, crying and revealing that her ex-boyfriend would not leave her alone and was following her everywhere. She explained that at the graduation event, he prevented anyone from dancing with her and acted very badly. He was upset that she was happy without him. When the police learned that Lauren was missing, they immediately began questioning everyone close to her. All evidence pointed to Nathaniel, as he seemed to be the only one with a motive to hurt her. However, his friends all insisted that he was innocent. The officers had encountered previous cases where crimes were committed by unexpected individuals. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives at their front door. During the discussion, Nathaniel appeared confused and upset about the sudden disappearance of someone he cared about. He shared that he had seen her recently around 7 p.m. when she stopped to talk to him in her car. Their conversation was pleasant but short, lasting no more than 5 minutes. He claimed that he was at home when Lauren disappeared and did not leave, but his alibi was hard to confirm since he was alone. His mother supported his story, mentioning that she had also seen Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend that day when Lauren visited the mall where she worked part-time. The mother was concerned about Nathaniel's well-being, which is why she had asked Lauren to speak with him. Nathaniel's parents had already consulted a psychiatrist, but the therapy sessions were unhelpful. Their son had become completely apathetic, merely going through the motions of life. His mother hoped that Lauren's words would inspire him or at least help him regain some pride so he could move forward. This request made things more complicated for Lauren, but the meeting was supposed to be brief, and so it remained under the radar. After her meeting with Nathaniel's mother, Lauren had a phone conversation with Nathaniel, which was captured by the mall's security cameras. Concerned about her ex-boyfriend, she reached out to him and made plans to meet at 7:05 p.m. Lauren arrived at Fujita House and texted, "Here." The information Nathaniel and Beth provided was indeed valuable to the police. However, it was unclear where Lauren had gone afterward and why her car was left unlocked at the beach. The case became clearer when Lauren Ashley's body was found. The detectives decided to visit Nathaniel again. However, he was not home this time. They didn't need him there, as they had a search warrant to gather evidence to support their theory about his possible involvement in the murder. Their examination began in the garage, where the specialists quickly noticed signs of a violent incident. Bloodstains were found on the floor, and several elastic cords hanging prominently on the wall matched those tangled in the victim's hair. Additional traces of blood were found throughout the house, including faint splatters on the doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink. It was clear someone had attempted to clean up the mess, but did so hastily and poorly. In the basement, detectives discovered a black gym bag containing wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathaniel's bedroom, they found a hidden stash with a pair of bloody shoes and wet, bloody clothes. The mud on the shoes appeared to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body was found, but samples would need to be sent to a lab for official analysis. Experts later confirmed the detectives' suspicions, revealing that the blood found in Fujita House belonged to Lauren Astley. They gathered compelling evidence linking Nathaniel to his ex-girlfriend's murder, but his location remained unknown, leading to him being declared a wanted person. The investigation advanced rapidly, and just a few hours later, the suspect was located. He had been staying with a cousin in a nearby town. On the morning of July 5, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. He appeared detached and quiet during his arrest and did not resist. However, he also refused to cooperate with investigators. During questioning, he remained silent about the charges against him. The detectives speculated that either he couldn't justify his actions or he was afraid to reveal too much, which is why he chose not to speak. Investigators believe that Lauren visited her ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother because she was worried about him and wanted to cheer him up. They later went to Fujita's garage, where a fight may have occurred. During this altercation, Nathaniel attacked Lauren and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing her, he drove her car to the beach and disposed of the car keys in a storm drain, which were later recovered. Nathaniel then returned home, loaded Lauren's body into his car, and drove it to a swamp. He attempted to cover up the crime. Although Nathaniel had not been physically violent with Lauren before, he had shown moments of uncontrolled aggression. His actions seemed to be driven by an inability to accept the breakup and feelings of resentment. On August 23, 2011, Nathaniel faced a preliminary hearing where he was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery using a dangerous weapon. When asked if he would plead guilty, he quietly said no. It soon became evident that his lawyers had acted unethically and had established a questionable strategy for his defense. Consequently, the prosecutor requested that the court deny bail for the defendant, and the court approved this request. On February 13, 2013, during the trial, Nathaniel's lawyer, William Sullivan, argued that his client was not mentally competent to stand trial due to insanity. He acknowledged that a murder had occurred, but emphasized that on the evening of July 3, 2011, Nathaniel had a severe episode of clinical depression that led to a psychotic breakdown. This episode impaired his ability to understand his actions during the attack on Lauren. Nathaniel's friends supported the defense's case by describing noticeable changes in his behavior, indicating that he had stopped socializing and lost interest in activities he once loved, like soccer, which he had even practiced despite being sick. Following his breakup with Lauren, it appeared that he transformed dramatically overnight. The psychiatrist who treated Nathaniel also testified at the court hearing. He diagnosed Nathaniel and recommended medication and therapy, but Nathaniel refused both. During the trial, it was proposed that the defendant's mental health issues might have originated from his painful breakup, but were mainly caused by his multiple head injuries from sports. The breakup worsened his condition and led to a severe episode. However, the prosecution disagreed with the defense's claims. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern argued that the defendant was aware of his actions, acted deliberately, and committed the crime for selfish reasons. Nathaniel was found to have been continuously stalking Lauren, causing her distress. On that particular day, just a few hours before her work ended, he showed up at the shopping center and watched her, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Lauren's situation, which arose at his mother's request, gave Nathaniel the chance to act on his criminal intentions. Witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case, and Nathaniel showed no remorse for his actions. An eyewitness saw Nathaniel returning home on the night of the incident with music playing in his car. A cousin also provided damaging information about him. She recalled that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother had called her to hang out, but she was busy and declined. He became very upset, expressing a desire to distract himself, but it seemed that didn't help. The following day, after news of Lauren's death broke, she reached out to him to ask if he was aware of it. He responded that no one would ever find out the truth about her death or the location of the murder weapon. He also acknowledged that he had driven his ex-girlfriend's car to the town beach. Recognizing that Nathaniel was implicated in the situation, his sister urged him to confess. In 2009, after Nathaniel and Lauren break up, an interesting incident occurred. Lauren went to a disco with friends, where a guy showed interest in her. Following the breakup, she decided to give this new guy a chance. However, Nathaniel, her ex, witnessed this and violently confronted the new man, threatening to harm him if he got close to Lauren again. Nathan's jealousy was evident. When he drank alcohol, he became unpredictable and dangerous. This situation revealed Nathaniel's violent tendencies and suggested that he could be a suspect. Additionally, new disturbing details emerged. Lauren's body showed wounds that had been inflicted prior to her death, including evident defensive wounds, which suggested that she had attempted to fight back. A forensic psychiatrist brought in by the prosecution evaluated the defendant's mental state. Unlike the earlier assessment, he concluded that Nathaniel was of sound mind and capable of making rational decisions at the time of the crime. The intense conflict between the prosecution and the defense hinged on whether Nathaniel would be deemed insane. If found insane, his punishment would be significantly less severe. While this wouldn't eliminate the charges against him, it would greatly reduce his level of responsibility. The trial was emotionally charged, as family members from both sides attended. Previously friends, they were now each suffering in their own way. Nathaniel's parents were in tears throughout the trial, struggling to comprehend what had occurred and feeling overwhelming guilt for their son. The burden of his actions weighed heavily on his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were devastated by the loss of their only daughter. Meanwhile, Lauren was enduring unimaginable pain caused by the man she loved. Experts determined that she lived for several minutes after the rope around her neck was tightened. Lauren's mother desperately sought to understand why this tragedy happened to her daughter and how long it had been in the making. On March 7, 2013, after a 3-week trial, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all counts. The jury took just 1 day to reach their final decision. The 20-year-old received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, Lauren's father approached Nathaniel's parents and embraced them, showcasing his strong character and compassion. Both families had experienced a profound loss. In response, Mary and Malcolm Astley founded the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund to educate teenagers about healthy relationships. They believe that Nathaniel's crime could have been avoided. Lauren's family is now committed to raising awareness about preventing relationship violence and coping with breakups. In 2024, the State Superior Court ended mandatory life sentences without parole for offenders under 20 at the time of their crime. As a result, Nathaniel now has a chance for freedom, although no hearing has been confirmed as of June 2025. In March 2025, Nathaniel Fujita requested a retrial in the Superior Court, with prosecutors responding, but the outcome has yet to be decided. Some believe that love can easily turn to hate. Obsessive love, mixed with jealousy and selfishness, can sometimes lead to irrational actions. The tragic experiences of the Fujita and Ashley families illustrate this point. As the sun set over Veracruz, Sylvia Jazmin got into her red car after enjoying a relaxing pedicure. She had just shared a warm meal with her mom and hoped to be home for dinner. Everything seemed normal. She parked by a quiet bus terminal, unaware that someone was watching her closely. The evening felt familiar calm. Then, suddenly, something happened. Hours later, Sylvia had vanished. Sylvia Jasmine Armendariz Alpuche was born in 1994 in a city in Veracruz, Mexico. She was the only daughter of Jose, an engineer in the oil industry, and Sylvia Alpuche, a dedicated homemaker who focused on raising her daughter. From a young age, Sylvia excelled academically. Thanks to her family's stable financial situation, she was able to attend a good school and fully embrace the opportunity. In addition to her academic success, Sylvia demonstrated exceptional talent in drawing and public speaking, receiving many awards during her school years. After graduating from high school, she studied industrial engineering in Mexico City. She also had a strong interest in languages. Through her determination and hard work, she became certified in both English and French, which provided her with opportunities that many only dream of. As a young adult, Sylvia gained independence and started her professional career at a large state-owned company in the petroleum and natural gas industry. However, her life wasn't solely about work and ambition. She cherished moments with her family, her close friends, and her 3 dogs. Like many young women, she envisioned getting married and starting a family one day. This dream began to take shape when she met a young man named Aldo. Aldo and Sylvia's life together is not well documented. Some sources indicate they met at work, while others believe it was at a gym. Regardless of the circumstances, they began dating. However, their relationship deteriorated quickly as Aldo became possessive and controlling, which conflicted with Sylvia's independent and determined personality. They eventually broke up between May and June of 2019. Sylvia moved on, concentrating on her personal goals and the life she was creating. On August 14, 2019, everything changed. That morning began just like any other day. Sylvia had breakfast with her mother, and later, they enjoyed lunch together, a tradition they both cherished. This would unknowingly be their last meal together. At around 4:30 p.m., Sylvia left home in her red car for a pedicure appointment downtown. Shortly after, she sent her mother a picture of her freshly painted toenails, assuring her she would be back in time for dinner. However, as night fell, Sylvia did not return home. Her mother became increasingly anxious and tried calling her, but there was no answer. She sent messages to find out if Sylvia's plans had changed. The response she received felt off. It lacked the usual warmth and affection that Sylvia always expressed, filling her with a sense of dread. By the early morning hour, her initial unease had escalated into a full-blown panic. She reached out to her family, hoping that someone might have seen or heard from Sylvia, but no one had. In a last attempt to find answers, she contacted Sylvia's friends, including Andrea, her daughter's closest friend. Andrea, who was also 25 and from Veracruz, had an impressive background like Sylvia's. She had excelled academically and earned a degree in petroleum engineering. Andrea specialized in oil well productivity, held multiple certifications, including one in English, and even started her own business in 2018. She was engaged and in the midst of planning her wedding. Despite their hectic schedules, Andrea and Sylvia remained close friends. Their bond started in preschool and grew stronger throughout high school, making them feel like sisters. On August 15th, Andrea told Sylvia's mother that she had talked to Sylvia the day before, but had not been in touch since. Worried, Sylvia's mother asked Andrea to call Aldo, as she had been blocked by him. Andrea reached out, but Aldo said he hadn't spoken to Sylvia in more than a week. His indifferent response did not help alleviate anyone's worries. As the hours went by without any news from Sylvia, her parents' initial concern turned into deep worry. They ultimately decided to report her missing at the local police station. Shortly after filing the report, the police found Sylvia's red car parked near a bus terminal, but there was no sign of her. Time passed slowly until a call from an oil company worker led to a shocking discovery. While clearing an area near the pipelines, workers noticed human remains discarded in a makeshift dump by Cosoleacaque Nueva Tiapa Highway in southern Veracruz. When the police arrived, they found a disturbing scene. The only identifiable remains were 2 lower legs, clearly belonging to a woman. The rest of the body had been severely burned and was unrecognizable. Investigators only had the legs to identify the victim, so they contacted Sylvia's parents. When her mother saw a photograph of the remains, she instantly recognized them as her daughter's due to the nail design, which matched a photo Sylvia had sent her just hours before she went missing. However, forensic verification was essential. The remains were sent to the medical examiner, and DNA results a few days later confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The body was that of 25-year-old Sylvia. The forensic analysis revealed a horrific scenario. Sylvia had been shot in the head, but the bullet wound alone was not the cause of death. Experts determined that she had died after being set on fire while still alive, wrapped in flammable plastic bags, which explained why her lower legs had not entirely burned. Armed with this disturbing evidence, investigators began to look into Sylvia's social life. During their discussions with family and friends, one name kept coming up: Aldo Castellan, her ex-boyfriend. Their breakup had been due to his possessiveness and jealousy, raising immediate concerns. When the police attempted to find Aldo, he had disappeared. His family claimed they did not know his whereabouts. This led to increasing suspicion that he had not simply vanished, but had received assistance to escape. Online speculation surged, filled with alleged sightings and rumors about where he might be. Meanwhile, Sylvia's family prepared for her burial, mourning deeply as they laid her to rest at the local cemetery. Her parents, heartbroken, struggled to comprehend how their lively and accomplished daughter had met such a tragic fate. As the investigation into Aldo escalated, authorities learned troubling details about his background. Just before Sylvia's murder, he had taken a 30-day leave from work. He also deleted all his social media accounts and severed connections with his former friends and acquaintances. His history was alarming. During his time as a student, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and frequently exhibited aggressive behavior. He often arrived at school armed and confronted classmates aggressively. Despite numerous concerns voiced by people at his university, he faced no repercussions, reportedly protected by his father, who was also known for his explosive temper. Further investigation showed that Aldo escaped using an ambulance from the state-owned petroleum company where Sylvia worked. He reportedly received help from an uncle in planning his escape. In response to this elusive and potentially dangerous fugitive, the Attorney General's office announced a reward of 400,000 pesos for any information that could lead to his capture. Meanwhile, Sylvia's mother channeled her grief into activism. She organized rallies, distributed flyers featuring Sylvia's photo, and demanded justice. Her efforts joined a growing movement of families in Mexico, determined to ensure their daughters' stories are not forgotten. When the global issue began in early 2020, leading to lockdowns and restrictions, Sylvia's family and supporters quickly adapted. They utilized social media to organize virtual campaigns and protests, determined to keep her case in the public eye. For several months, there was no progress in the investigation. However, on July 14, 2020, nearly a year after Sylvia's death, there was a significant breakthrough. Aldo, now 32, was arrested. Officials attributed his capture to diligent investigative efforts, while media outlets suggested it was a stroke of luck. Police had received an anonymous tip about a man causing a disturbance at a public transport stop. When officers arrived to question him, he brandished a knife but was subdued and identified as the fugitive. Upon confirming his identity, authorities noted that there was an active warrant for his arrest for the femicide of Sylvia. While in hiding, Aldo took many steps to avoid being found. He lived in a well-supplied home that helped him stay hidden for several months. He also changed his appearance a lot by gaining weight and growing his hair long. When he was finally questioned, he claimed not to know Sylvia, but it didn't take long for his lie to fall apart. Aldo was arrested and moved to a social reintegration center, where he was formally charged with Sylvia's murder and with attempting to destroy evidence by burning her remains. Soon after his arrest, his mother shared a letter online declaring her son's innocence. She argued that there was no solid evidence against him and suggested that he was being unfairly targeted simply because he was Sylvia's ex-partner. In her statement, she claimed that Aldo had suffered physical abuse at the hands of the police, who she accused of trying to coerce a confession. She also criticized law enforcement for not exploring other potential leads in the case. While she expressed compassion for Sylvia's family, She pledged to advocate for what she believes to be the truth about her son. Aldo's mother said her son had gone into hiding for nearly a year because their family was receiving death threats. When Aldo was found, it brought relief to Sylvia's family and friends, as many thought the case was close to being resolved and that justice was finally coming. However, just when it seemed closure was within reach, unexpected news changed everything. On December 3, 2020, the police arrested Andrea, Sylvia's lifelong best friend, in connection with the crime. This news shocked Sylvia's family and the community. Andrea was a key advocate for justice, even providing the crucial voice message in which Sylvia identified Aldo as her potential killer. She supported Sylvia's mother during protests, allowed her phone to be analyzed for evidence, and was widely recognized as a vital force in maintaining attention on the case. However, authorities accused her of involvement in the crime, stating they had strong evidence against her. Prosecutors reported that several protected witnesses came forward, with one claiming that Andrea had been secretly involved with Aldo while he was with Sylvia. These allegations caused distress among those who knew both women. Andrea rejected all accusations, insisting that she had been in a serious relationship with another man she intended to marry before her arrest disrupted those plans. She provided a detailed account of her activities on the day Sylvia went missing. She claimed she had visited a spa, forgot her wallet, and called her mother to bring it to her. Her mother confirmed that they returned home together around 8:30 p.m. However, cell tower data contradicted their story. Analysis of the phones belonging to Sylvia, Aldo, and Andrea showed that all three were at the same location around the time the crime likely happened. This discovery led to new protests, this time initiated by Andrea's parents, who argued that their daughter was being wrongly accused for not testifying against Aldo. By early 2021, Aldo and Andrea started sharing their perspectives on the situation through letters and social media posts from their detention centers. In one handwritten note, Andrea expressed her gratitude to those supporting her and her family. She hoped that the prosecution would take a closer look at the evidence and reconsider the possibility of a mistake. Meanwhile, Andrea's parents initiated a social media campaign to share photos, documents, and her side of the story. They also called for the anonymous witnesses who accused her to be revealed, arguing that transparency is crucial for ensuring a fair trial. Despite their efforts, the outcome remained unchanged. In September 2022, after a long and emotionally intense trial, 27-year-old Andrea was found guilty of murdering Sylvia and sentenced to 70 years in prison. The judge referred to the so-called overwhelming evidence, especially the geolocation data from Andrea's phone, which showed she was at the crime scene during the crucial time. For Sylvia's parents, the verdict provided some legal closure, but it did not bring peace. Meanwhile, one for Andrea's family, this verdict marked the start of a new struggle, one against a sentence they believed was based on flawed evidence. Andrea's defense attorney criticized both the prosecution and the judge, arguing that the trial was affected by inconsistencies and weak evidence. From the defense's viewpoint, Andrea was condemned not for any proven involvement in the crime, but for her refusal to testify against Aldo. Although she knew about the violent relationship between Sylvia and Aldo, Andrea had never seen the crime occur and lacked concrete proof to blame anyone. Her mother publicly condemned what she called a flawed investigation, highlighting that, even though 4 alleged eyewitnesses came forward a year after the crime, none had actually witnessed the event take place. There was no solid proof of a romantic relationship between Andrea and Aldo, which prosecutors used to suggest they were involved together. The main issue was the cell phone geolocation data. Prosecutors argued that this data placed Andrea at the crime scene and claimed it came from her phone. Meanwhile, the lawyer argued that Andrea was being unfairly blamed, serving as a convenient scapegoat for a public demanding justice. After the investigators struggled to create a solid case against Aldo, they shifted their focus to Andrea, perhaps to avoid confronting their shortcomings. In November 2022, Andrea's legal team filed an appeal with the Superior Court, seeking to have her conviction overturned. They also requested an investigation into possible abuses of power and political interference, highlighting actions by the then governor of Veracruz. Andrea's family was hopeful that the higher court would act fairly and give her a chance to demonstrate her innocence. After nearly 2 years, Andrea achieved a significant breakthrough. She was granted a federal writ of protection, a legal order from the federal courts. The court determined that her trial had serious procedural issues. The federal court has ordered a new trial, which allows previously withheld evidence to be presented. This decision gives Andrea a fresh opportunity to prove her innocence and possibly regain her freedom. The most recent development in Andrea's case took place on April 21, 2025, during an important hearing. Her mother reported that the new defense team introduced verified geolocation data connected to Andrea's actual phone evidence that had inexplicably been left out during her first trial. This data challenges the prosecution's claims and could undermine the basis of the original conviction. However, as of May 2025, Andrea's release had not been officially decided. At the same time, Aldo's legal proceedings were facing significant delays, and official records showed that his trial had not yet started. Despite several requests from his defense team for house arrest, a judge upheld his preventive detention in 2024. By March 2025, Sylvia's mother, along with friends and supporters, organized a protest calling for Aldo to be put on trial. During the protest, she raised concerns about why the accused had not yet faced justice while in custody. The prosecutor's office provided vague explanations, mentioning that procedural delays were due to ongoing legal appeals. Sylvia's case has become emblematic of the fight for justice in a country plagued by gender-based violence, which continues to affect many lives. What originally seemed to be a closed case has now raised serious issues about due process, corruption, and the impact of delayed justice. The ongoing debate questions whether Andrea was truly involved in her friend's murder or if she is an innocent victim caught in a broken legal system. Should Andrea be released? She is innocent or guilty? It began as an ordinary morning in Brisbane. Hannah Clark was getting her 3 kids into the car for their school run when everything took a sudden turn. A man washing his car heard Hannah's urgent cries, and a passing driver saw her engulfed in flames as she tried to escape. He quickly came over with a fire extinguisher, but was shocked to witness the car explode. What was happening? This was no accident. It was something much more sinister, and the frightening reality had been developing over several years. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988 in Brisbane, Australia, to her loving parents, Sue and Lloyd. From a young age, she was known for her cheerful, outgoing personality. Hannah had a special talent for making people smile and always dreamed of becoming a mother. She had a close relationship with her younger brother, taking on the protective role typical of an older sister. As an athlete, Hannah excelled in trampoline gymnastics and represented her state at just 16 years old. In her final year of school, she showcased her leadership skills by being selected as school captain, a role meant for students who set a positive example for others. After graduating, she followed her passion for working with children by teaching youth gymnastics at the Police Citizens Youth Club. At her workplace, Hannah met Rowan Baxter, who would eventually have a significant impact on her life. Rowan was born in 1977 in New Zealand and experienced a challenging childhood characterized by instability. His father was imprisoned when he was young, which greatly affected his early years. Family members described Rowan as an unpredictable child with disturbing tendencies toward cruelty. Despite these difficulties, Rowan pursued a career in sports. He played rugby at Tangaroa College before signing a contract with the New Zealand Warriors team in 2005. Although he was officially part of the team, he never actually played in a game and earned a modest salary of $10,000 per year. Nevertheless, he often referred to himself as a former professional rugby player, using this label to enhance his reputation, both personally and professionally. People who knew Rowan personally described him as highly competitive, controlling, and prone to anger. He had a strong desire to dominate those around him and could not handle rejection. Before meeting Hannah, Rowan had been married and had a son from that marriage. He married at 18 while his wife was only 16. By the time their son was 2 years old, Rowan's controlling behavior had become too much for his wife. She wanted to leave him, but he refused and resorted to stalking, making threats. In a frightening incident, he told her he had thought about harming himself and their child. Feeling trapped, she decided to stay in the marriage despite her fears. In 2008, while Hannah was teaching gymnastics, Rowan's son was in her class, which is how they first met. At that time, Rowan was still married but pursued Hannah, claiming his marriage was already over and that he was only living with his wife for the sake of their son. A few months after starting their affair, Rowan ended his marriage and moved out, agreeing to co-parent his child. Despite this, he continued to exhibit aggressive behavior, threatening his ex-wife during disagreements about parenting. In October 2012, Hannah and Rowan got married while she was 14 weeks pregnant with their first child. Soon after their wedding, Rowan stopped paying child support for his son from his previous marriage. On April 10, 2013, their daughter Aaliyah was born. She was a smart child who loved reading and had a strong sense of right and wrong. Even at a young age, Aaliyah noticed how her father treated her mother and wasn't afraid to confront him about it. In January 2015, Hannah and Rowan, both enthusiastic about fitness, opened a gym. Although Hannah's parents and another investor provided the funding, the business eventually faced financial difficulties. In March 2015, their second daughter, Liana, was born. She had a gentle personality and often helped keep the peace in the family. Liana would try to comfort their father when he got angry. Their third and youngest child, Trey, was born on December 4, 2016, a devoted mama's boy. Trey loved to run and play, but he was happiest when he was with his mother. Over the years, Rowan became more controlling and aggressive. His possessiveness towards Hannah grew. He restricted her independence by insisting they share a Facebook account, leaving her without her own. Gradually, he isolated her from her close-knit family, limiting her interactions with them. His controlling behavior also affected their children. If they didn't clean up quickly enough, he would throw away their toys. He even canceled fun activities to punish Hannah and their children. After an argument, Rowan took the children and left the house. Feeling upset, Hannah called her mother to talk about it. Later, Rowan confronted Hannah and repeated their entire conversation verbatim. When Hannah asked how he knew what she said, Rowan casually mentioned that he had accidentally left his phone recording. Rowan exerted control over Hannah in their intimate relationship, insisting she comply with his demands every day. If she pushed back, he would instigate arguments, making her life extremely difficult. In a particularly frightening moment, he broke her watch in a fit of anger and left the house, worried he might harm himself. Hannah called her mother in panic, fearing for his safety. Her parents drove around Brisbane looking for him. When Rowan eventually returned home, he told her that he had gone to a church parking lot and almost attempted to end his own life. By November 2019, Hannah felt overwhelmed and knew she needed to leave her situation. She reached out to a family violence resource center for help, sharing her fears about how to safely escape from Rowan. Concerned he was keeping tabs on her, she collaborated with the center to develop a temporary escape plan. This plan was set in motion in December 2019. Hannah took only the essentials and, after picking up Aaliyah from school, went directly to her best friend's house to protect herself. She left her phone in her car, suspecting that Rowan was tracking her movements. The following day, she moved to her parents' home for safety. On December 4th, Rowan contacted Relationships Australia, which helps families and individuals in crisis. They offered him a counseling session on December 10th, but he did not confirm or attend. On December 14th, 10 days later, he saw his doctor, revealed that Hannah had left him and taken the children. He talked about his control issues and became emotional, expressing regret for his past actions. He returned for a mental health consultation on December 16th and received a prescription for medication commonly used to treat insomnia. Meanwhile, Hannah decided to seek legal protection. On December 6th, she went to the police and was advised to get a domestic violence order against Rowan. However, she was hesitant, fearing that legal action might worsen his behavior. Despite her concerns, Hannah kept in contact with Rowan, hoping he would stay involved with their children. He frequently manipulated her, urging her to consider the kids and suggesting that leaving him would hurt them. Additionally, he started telling Hannah's parents that she was mentally unstable and falsely claimed that he was innocent of any wrongdoing. This resulted in a tiring cycle of conflict. His harassment intensified, similar to what she had experienced in his previous marriage. He started appearing uninvited, entering her parents' home without permission, and following her. On December 26, 2019, Rowan was supposed to return the children after spending the day with them. However, when Hannah came to pick them up, he forcefully placed Lyanna in the front seat of his car and drove away quickly. Later that evening, he called Hannah on FaceTime and made a demand. If she did not end an alleged affair, he would not return Lyanna. Frustrated, Hannah reached out to her lawyer, who wrote a formal letter demanding the return of Lyanna. As the situation escalated, the police decided to take action and issued a domestic violence order on Hannah's behalf, even though she wasn't ready to file one herself. The officers found Rowan at his home. They informed him of the court order that required him to stay at least 300 feet away from Hannah and the children until a hearing could decide the permanent arrangements. The police then took Lyanna into custody and brought her back to Hannah. Rowan was barred from contacting them until January 4th, 2020, when they were all scheduled to appear in court. During a welfare check, officers observed that Lyanna seemed scared. Since her abduction, she experienced intense separation anxiety, feeling the need to always see her mother. Authorities suggested that Hannah seek specialist child psychology services for the children, but she did not follow through on this after the police intervention. In conversation with authorities, Hannah gave a detailed account of the abuse she suffered. She revealed that Rowan forced her to sleep with him every night while belittling her. He insulted her by saying she was disgusting and compared being intimate with her to intimate with a bucket. Hannah also expressed her long-standing fear for her own life and her children's safety. Rowan had chillingly detailed a plan to kill his ex-wife, their son, and himself, which made Hannah genuinely afraid he would attempt something similar with her and their children. Rowan's troubling behavior on social media became increasingly evident. In several videos he shared, he interacted with the children in a dangerously rough manner, occasionally displaying violent actions. One alarming video showed him forcing the children into an ice bath while little Trey cried uncontrollably. Despite this disturbing evidence, Rowan attempted to control the story. Just as Hannah submitted her statement, he reached out to the police, claiming he was afraid of her. On December 29, 2019, Rowan participated in his first counseling session for mental health treatment. During this session, he confessed to having issues with jealousy and recognized that Hannah had left him because of his controlling behavior. However, there was no comprehensive evaluation for potential family violence risks. The session mainly covered basic coping techniques, like breathing exercises, without addressing the seriousness of his situation. His mental health evaluation indicated that he was dealing with moderate depression and anxiety, but he denied any thoughts of self-harm or harming others. On December 31st, Rowan attended another counseling session and revealed that a protection order had been issued against him. He claimed that Hannah had made false accusations and was deeply upset about being unable to see his children. Notes from that session show that he and the counselor talked about the emotional stress of being away from his kids. Rowan continued to attend counseling, returning on January 6th. During this session, he expressed a desire for joint custody of the children, even as tensions rose. Again, no risk assessment was conducted, and the session focused solely on strategies to help Rowan cope, such as trying new activities. On January 8th, their case was heard in court. Rowan challenged the domestic violence order, but the judge ruled in favor of Hannah. The court decided that Rowan was prohibited from committing any acts of family violence, putting the children at risk, coming within 300 feet of Hannah's home, or contacting her for any reason unrelated to the children. Despite this, Rowan sought help from a men's legal service. On January 17th, he expressed his concern that Hannah intended to take the children and leave, removing him from their lives permanently. Around the same time, his behavior raised alarms. He began appearing at the same coffee shops and shopping centers as Hannah, seemingly by chance, but it happened too frequently to be coincidental. Hannah started to suspect that he might have placed a tracking device on her vehicle. During the January 21st session, He claimed that he was being unfairly labeled as mentally unstable to restrict his access to his children. Determined to contest the domestic violence order, Rowan's lawyer submitted a letter to the court, arguing that Hannah sought the order solely to regain custody of their children. On January 23rd, the court made a final decision on custody, granting Hannah full custody while allowing Rowan to spend alternating weekends with the children and scheduled FaceTime calls. All exchanges of the children would occur at Hannah's parents' home. The court's decision did not lessen the children's distress. They often showed hesitance about visiting their father, especially Aaliyah. During one visit, Aaliyah called Hannah in tears, saying they were being driven somewhere, but she didn't know where. On January 31st, Rowan returned Trey later than expected. As Hannah took her son out of the car, she noticed explicit photos of herself lying in plain sight. Shocked, she grabbed the photos and turned to go inside, but Rowan suddenly got out of the car and twisted her wrist behind her back. Alarmed, Hannah's mother quickly called the police. Rowan denied any wrongdoing. A doctor later confirmed that Hannah had a sprained wrist and put it in a splint. Hannah reported the incident and the breach of the domestic violence order to the police, but when officers tried to question Rowan, he refused to answer without a lawyer present. Rowan's life was falling apart. He lost his job as a personal trainer at a local gym, and Hannah's lawyers notified his legal team that she would not be adhering to the parenting agreement anymore. As a result, Rowan would no longer have access to the children. Overwhelmed by anger, Rowan viewed himself as the victim. Although he violated the domestic violence order, the police did not arrest him right away. They instead gave him a notice to appear in court. He was also charged with common assault for injuring Hannah's wrist. On February 17, Rowan went to a hardware store where he bought zip ties, a jerry can, and denatured alcohol. The following day, he filled the jerry can with 5 liters of gasoline. During his shopping trip, he also purchased 3 Kinder Surprise eggs and some lollipops. On February 18th at 3:28 p.m., he called Youth and Family Services to ask about a men's support program. 30 minutes later, he contacted a men's helpline with the same inquiry. Later that evening, at 6:25 p.m., he called a friend, crying and claiming he couldn't see his children during a scheduled FaceTime call. During this time, Hannah sensed that something was seriously wrong. She confided in her mother about needing to write a will, fearing that if Rowan harmed her, he would end up in prison and someone would have to care for the children. She also shared her concerns with a friend at the gym, expressing that she believed Rowan might hurt the kids or even herself. Unfortunately, her worst fears would soon come true. On the morning of February 19th, 2020, Hannah and her mother followed their usual routine by going to the gym. After their workout, Hannah returned home at 6:20 a.m. and went out again to buy coffee for herself and her mother. She sat on her mother's bed, enjoying her drink while her mother got ready for work, with the children nearby. At 7:20 a.m., Sue kissed her daughter and grandchildren goodbye, not knowing it would be the last time she would see them. Hannah then loaded her 3 children into the car to take Aaliyah and Liana to school. Trey was safely strapped in the middle seat, while Liana sat in the passenger side rear seat. Just as Hannah started the engine, Rowan jumped into the passenger seat holding a jerry can filled with gasoline and demanded that she drive. In a panic, Hannah screamed at him to get out of the car. She drove a short distance and stopped next to a man, Michael Zemek, who was washing his car, desperately calling for help. "Call the police. He's going to kill me. He's poured petrol on me." Michael turned and saw Rowan holding Hannah down, preventing her from escaping. Despite her struggles, Rowan remained eerily calm and in control. In a sudden moment of determination, Hannah broke free and scrambled out of the car. But by then, Rowan had already set everything on fire. Flames quickly engulfed her. Michael quickly sprang into action upon seeing Hannah surrounded by flames. He shouted for her to roll on the ground while he grabbed a hose to put out the fire. Once Hannah was safe and no longer burning, Michael focused on Rowan, extinguishing the flames on his body. The huge fire made Michael unaware of the presence of the children in the car. As the shock of the situation set in, Hannah screamed about her children, realizing her urgency. Michael rushed into his house to call emergency services. By the time he returned, another bystander, Samantha Covey had arrived. She had been driving when she saw the thick black smoke and flames. Samantha picked up the hose and continued to try to douse the fire. She stayed with Hannah, comforting her as they awaited help. Meanwhile, Hannah, in great pain, kept asking about her children. Nearby, another neighbor, Carrie Fernandez, heard Hannah's cries for help. As soon as she saw the burning vehicle, she called emergency services and stayed on the line with dispatchers. While she spoke, the car suddenly erupted into a large fireball. Grabbing a fire extinguisher, Carrie hurried toward the vehicle, trying to fight the flames. The intense heat caused the car to roll backward as people shouted for her to be careful. Hannah, barely able to stand, cried out in despair. Investigators later found that Rowan had placed a jerry can filled with fuel directly in front of Aaliyah's seat, ensuring the explosion would happen right at her feet. Although Rowan did not have any fuel on him, each of the children and Hannah did. As the fire intensified, Rowan suddenly jumped back into the burning car. For a brief moment, it looked like he was attempting to rescue the children, but instead, he grabbed something and then jumped back out. A bystander witnessed Rowan taking a knife from the car and shouted a warning to Carrie, who was still trying to put out the flames with a fire extinguisher. Realizing the danger, she quickly moved away as Rowan, now armed, got ready to make his final move. Rowan knelt on the ground, placed the knife against his chest, and fell forward onto it. He curled into a fetal position and died shortly after. The destruction he caused was irreversible. In one morning, Rowan had killed his 3 children, Aaliyah, Liana, Trey, and left Hannah severely burned over most of her body. Even as emergency responders arrived, Hannah's thoughts were consumed by her children. She repeatedly asked, "Are they okay? Did someone save them?" The paramedics understood the grim reality and realized there was nothing they could say to alleviate her suffering. Instead, they encouraged her to focus on her own health. Knowing she was close to losing consciousness with 97% body burns, that night, Hannah passed away from her injuries, becoming the last member of her family to die. After Rowan's death, authorities discovered a disturbing note on his phone that said, "I'm ending your game. I no longer want to participate. You can't interfere with someone's life like this and expect them to accept it. I've told the kids that you love them. I'm sure they will miss you." The autopsy reports revealed the tragic details of what occurred. Hannah died from multiple organ failure due to severe burns. Aaliyah, just 6 years old, had burns covering over 100% of her body. Although her blood tested positive for high levels of carbon monoxide, that was not the cause of her death, indicating she was still alive when the flames engulfed her. Liana, only 4 years old, died from direct burns, smoke inhalation, and other fire-related injuries. Trey, who was not yet 3 years old, suffered the same fate. Rowan, who had stabbed himself in the heart, had neither alcohol nor banned substance in his system. His brain showed no signs of disease or injury, which confirms that his horrific actions were not due to a mental breakdown, but rather a deliberate and calculated intent. The tragic events of February 19th, 2020 deeply affected Australia. Many realized that coercive control, the subtle yet harmful emotional and psychological abuse that Rowan inflicted on Hannah for years, was not widely recognized as a form of domestic violence. On March 9th, 2020, Hannah, Aaliyah, Liana, and Trey were buried together in one coffin. Her brother, heartbroken by the tragedy, expressed his sorrow with these final words. He is so sorry he couldn't protect her. Lisa Marie McIntosh Neufel was born on May 20th, 1971 in Reynoldsburg, Franklin County, Ohio, USA. She was the daughter of William Clark and Rita Bala McIntosh, who later had another daughter named Laura. Growing up in a small, loving family, Lisa was known for her kindness and willingness to share her smile with others. In elementary school, her friendly personality stood out. She quickly won the affection of her classmates and teachers. During high school, She became known for her sharp sense of humor. Therefore, it was no surprise when she chose to pursue a career in social work after graduating. In the mid-90s, Lisa began her career and met Nicholas. They discovered they shared many common interests, especially their strong family values shaped by Nicholas's upbringing. His character and maturity quickly captured Lisa's heart, and they soon got married. Their love for children made Lisa's first pregnancy an incredibly joyful moment in her life. In 1999, they welcomed their first daughter, Megan. While Nicholas worked hard at his construction business, Lisa dedicated herself to caring for Megan. Despite their busy lives, they always made time for outdoor walks, especially by the nearby lakes. Over the years, camping became a cherished family tradition that Lisa loved. The following year, Lisa chose to return to her career. She received a great opportunity to join the Department of Social Services team for children and families in Cuyahoga County. Meanwhile, the relationship between Lisa and Nicholas worsened, leading to their divorce in 2003. Despite this, they worked to maintain friendly relations for the sake of their daughter. During this period, Lisa developed a strong desire to support children without families, became a foster mother. Soon after, both children and teenagers waiting for their cases to be resolved began to stay temporarily in the home of Lisa and her daughter, Megan. At 34, Lisa felt she was fulfilling her purpose and was truly happy. In 2005, Lisa's life changed when she met Kevin Knofel. He had a son from a previous relationship. Kevin had a diverse work history, having been a medical technician and a school bus driver. At the time they met, he was a truck driver for a food company. Despite the good pay, his job left him with little time for personal relationships, so he quickly asked Lisa out on a date. Lisa was flattered by the attention from an attractive man. However, worried that the meeting might not meet her expectations, she asked her colleague to join them. To everyone's surprise, Kevin was polite and courteous. Lisa realized she had found someone special. Later, Kevin told his sister that he had met a woman he genuinely liked. After a year of dating, Lisa and Kevin got married and bought a house together. They also took out several insurance policies worth a total of $750,000 to secure their family's future. In 2009, the happy couple welcomed their first daughter. Sometimes, Lisa couldn't believe how much happiness life had brought her. Meanwhile, Lisa kept registering her home as a temporary shelter for children. In July 2011, she became the guardian of a teenager named Sabrina Zunick, whose story deeply affected Lisa. Sabrina was born on October 27, 1994 in Cleveland, and was the only daughter of her parents. Her childhood was very difficult. Her mother had a long history of serious theft convictions. Additionally, her father struggled with paranoid schizophrenia and was also well known to the local police for selling banned substance. The birth of their daughter did not lead the parents to change their way of life. Instead, they continued to face legal issues and struggled with serious addictions. To help care for Sabrina, they often asked her paternal grandmother for assistance. In February 1996, when Sabrina was just 2 years old, her father was arrested again for violence against his wife. After his release, the paternal grandmother suggested that he seek professional help for his mental health, but he declined and sank further into his problems. Meanwhile, Sabrina's mother also refused to take responsibility for taking care of her, so she stayed with her grandmother. After 2 years, Sabrina was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. She struggled to interact with her peers and faced significant behavioral challenges as a teenager. This led to frequent criticism from school officials and poor academic performance. As she continued to have difficulty fitting in, she often got into fights with other children. The situation at home was also troubling. Sabrina began stealing money from her grandmother to buy illegal substances. This prompted her grandmother to seek help from the guardianship system, explaining that she could no longer care for Sabrina due to her health issues. As a result, at the age of 14, Sabrina was placed into state care and moved to a shelter on the outskirts of the city. In the following years, Sabrina experienced a series of temporary housing situations, all while longing for stability and a real family. During this time, she was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, and depression. When she got the chance to live with Knofel family, she felt it was a sign of hope. Upon arriving at their home, her hopes were realized. She was warmly welcomed as a family member. Sabrina received her own room and was surrounded by care, quickly becoming comfortable playing with Megan and looking after little Haley. After living with the family for 5 months, Sabrina started to improve her school performance, something she hadn't done before. However, she began to feel jealous of Megan and Haley, suspecting that her adoptive parents favored them. This jealousy often resulted in arguments with Lisa. Kevin, despite being away from home frequently, made an effort to resolve the tension when he returned, and Sabrina sought his support during these times. Aware of Sabrina's challenging background, Knofels chose to take steps to help her feel more valued and included in the family. The situation quickly became troubling and unexpected. Unknown to others, Kevin and Sabrina's relationship was more than just that of a stepfather and stepdaughter. By spring 2012, they had entered into a secret affair. While traveling, Kevin would pay Sabrina to send him explicit photos. Whenever they had the chance, they would meet privately, making fun of Lisa's belief in her husband's good intentions toward his adopted daughter. Over time, Lisa becomes increasingly aware of the strangeness, asking her husband to pay less attention to their adopted daughter, which causes conflict between them. The arguments became so intense that Lisa considered getting a divorce. Meanwhile, Kevin, not wanting to lose Sabrina, reached out to her social worker to ask if he could keep custody of her if they divorced. In the morning, Kevin started waking up early to take Sabrina to school. During these rides, he discussed the impending divorce with Lisa and envisioned a future where they could all live together happily. This dream motivated Sabrina. At one point, Kevin told Sabrina that, due to insurance policies, Lisa would be worth more to them dead than alive, and that the money could give them a comfortable life. From then on, Kevin started to manipulate Sabrina, instructing her on how to stage a robbery and how to use a knife to kill. To ease her fears about being caught, he reassured her that serious consequences were unlikely. He also told her to act as if she couldn't remember anything about what had happened. Kevin promised that the money they would receive would allow them to buy a house where Sabrina could take care of little Haley as if she were her own daughter. Sabrina completely accepted the plan. Sabrina needed help from someone in the criminal underworld, so she brought up the situation with a close friend from school. While they were in Kevin's car, they discussed how to find someone to eliminate Lisa. The friend, shocked by what she was hearing, tried to distance herself from the situation. Despite this failure, Sabrina is determined to carry out her plan. At that time, she was focused on her future and was discussing with her teachers the possibility of going to cosmetology school or becoming a model after graduating high school. On October 27, 2012, when Sabrina turned 18, she understood that she had to leave the foster care system and separate from Kevin. Determined to continue her stay, she filed a petition with the court, which surprisingly approved her request. On November 15, while Kevin was driving her to school, he pulled over, in tears, and confessed that he was contemplating in his own life due to a recent argument with Lisa. This moment was crucial for Sabrina, and she assured Kevin that she would help him. He then instructed her to wear a mask to disguise her face and make it appear as though a robbery was taking place. A few hours later, Kevin left Sabrina at home when he went to work. That night, Megan went to her room, while Lisa and little Haley slept in the master bedroom. Meanwhile, Kevin and Sabrina were texting each other. After midnight, Sabrina got up from her room, went to the kitchen, and took a sharp knife. Quietly, she entered the bedroom and hid Haley in the closet. When Lisa woke up, she was disoriented in the dark and thought it was Megan. Before she could say anything, Sabrina attacked her. Lisa screamed. Megan, hearing the screams, rushed into the bedroom to find a terrifying scene. Trembling, she called 911. Megan's panic and confusion grew with each moment as Sabrina, undeterred, continued her attack. Seconds later, Lisa died. When paramedics arrived, they found Megan crying and devastated over her mother's death. Fortunately, they rescued little Haley from the closet, where she had been hiding in fear. Officers then approached Sabrina, who had multiple cuts on her arms and appeared to be in shock. She was quickly arrested and taken to the hospital. Upon hearing about the incident, Kevin to go back home. During a casual interview, Agents observed that he remained surprisingly calm despite the seriousness of the situation. In fact, he seemed more focused on the details of the attack than on its tragic outcome. 10 hours after the incident, Sabrina was moved from the hospital to the police station for questioning. Once there, the detectives read her rights and told her she was considered a suspect in the murder. Sabrina explained that she had gone into Lisa's bedroom to get a headache pill, but then felt a mental block. The detective asked her several questions about what happened next. Sabrina carefully followed the instructions Kevin had given her, saying her memory was unclear. Even when the detective pressed her, she remained consistent with Kevin's plan. The detective decided to change his approach and started asking Sabrina about her relationship with Lisa. Sabrina insisted that she had no knowledge of what happened to the victim. Realizing that sharing information was not effective, the detectives shifted their focus to exploring potential motives for the suspect. As a result, Sabrina was placed under preliminary arrest at the Lake County Jail. The Lake County Medical Examiner's report revealed shocking details. According to court records, Lisa was stabbed 178 times with a 15-inch knife. Many of the wounds were self-defense. The attack was so violent, the knife bent. Many defensive wounds showed that Lisa fought hard to protect herself from the attacker. The knife used in the assault had bent due to the strength of the blows. On Saturday, November 17, 2012, family and friends gathered to support Kevin and his daughter Megan. They observed that Kevin was behaving unusually and seemed distant. His strange behavior stemmed from panic. He was worried that Sabrina might report him or that something had gone awry. A few hours later, Kevin attempted to visit Sabrina in prison, but the authorities denied him access. This denial angered him and raised concerns among the detectives investigating the situation. After his wife's funeral, Kevin started reaching out to insurance companies to collect payments on his policies. He used the money to pay off his mortgage, buy new cars, and invest in real estate in Florida. At that time, he felt confident that no one would discover his secrets and firmly believed in Sabrina's loyalty. In May 2013, feeling betrayed, Sabrina chose to cooperate with the investigation and testify against Kevin. In her testimony, which she provided in exchange for a lighter sentence, she shared all the details of their relationship, including how Kevin convinced her to commit the crime and his intentions behind it. She also talked about the original plan to hire someone else to carry out the murder. The detective asked her to leave a message for Kevin regarding an important discussion. On June 4, 2013, Kevin called Sabrina again. Not realizing that authorities were recording their conversation, Sabrina expressed her worries about the police discovering her past, and Kevin reassured her while being careful not to share specific details that could incriminate him. The detective tried to replicate the operation, but it didn't work out. In their quest for more evidence, investigators obtained court approval to examine the phone records of Sabrina and Kevin. Their analysis uncovered over 100 messages exchanged between November 1 and November 15, including 78 messages sent in the half hour leading up to Lisa's death. These messages, which had not been revealed before, provided evidence indicating Kevin's guilt. Consequently, on August 9, 2013, he was arrested despite maintaining his innocence. He faced 6 charges of abuse, 3 charges of being an accessory to murder with aggravating circumstances, and 2 charges of conspiracy to commit murder with aggravating circumstances. The trial began on May 29, 2014, in Lake County Common Pleas Court. In his opening statement, the prosecutor presented evidence suggesting that Kevin had heavily influenced Sabrina to commit the crime, highlighting the inappropriate nature of their relationship. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Sabrina's mental health issues showed she acted independently. However, this argument weakened when Sabrina stated her love for Kevin during questioning and confirmed that both of them planned the crime together in order to be together. The defense attorney highlighted the absence of physical evidence against his client and the lack of proof regarding their supposed relationship. In response, Sabrina reluctantly agreed, her sadness evident as Kevin's lawyer presented his case. However, she remained firm in her account of what happened, stressing that she was not the only one involved. On June 11, 2014, after 9 hours of discussion, the Lake County jury found Kevin guilty of all 11 charges. The next hearing was held nearly 2 months later, on August 6, 2014. Before the judge made his ruling, the prosecutor spoke to the audience, stating that Kevin never genuinely intended to create a happy life with Sabrina. Instead, he used her as a tool to gain money from his wife's insurance and to acquire their shared property. Before the sentencing, the judge explained Kevin's involvement in the crime. Consequently, Kevin was sentenced to life in prison, with the option for parole after 30 years for the murder of Lisa. On September 29, 2014, the judge presided over a hearing where Sabrina Zunick was convicted of murder. Before handing down the sentence, the judge acknowledged that Sabrina had been manipulated by Kevin. However, he stressed that the severity of the crime was more significant than this factor. Expressing remorse, Sabrina apologized to the victims and stated her desire to begin healing. Like Kevin, she was also sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. In February 2017, a judge decided that Megan and Haley, who witnessed a terrible event, should each receive $6.2 million in compensation for their personal and property losses. This tragedy deeply affected the victim's eldest daughter. However, despite the trauma that could have influenced her future, she chose to pursue a degree in criminal justice. She wanted to honor her mother's legacy, as her mother was always willing to protect and support those in need. It was a quiet night in the small town of Matapalo, Guanacaste, but inside one house, a terrible event was unfolding. A man had just assaulted his partner, while a child nearby attempted to escape. Suddenly, everything went silent. What occurred in that house? And how did the little girl manage to survive? Jessica Duran grew up in Costa Rica. From a young age, she experienced neglect, not because she lacked family, but due to a lack of proper care. Locals often saw her wandering the streets barefoot, unkempt, and hungry, frequently asking for food. She dropped out of school early and soon became involved in addiction. By age 13, she was often seen in local bars, dressed provocatively, smoking marijuana, drinking beer, and seeking clients. When she turned 20, she became pregnant for the first time. Little is known about that child, except that reports indicate the baby was taken in by the paternal grandmother. A year later, Jessica met a man at a bar. He was also using banned substance, and they began a tumultuous relationship. After 3 years, Jessica became pregnant again. However, before the baby was born, he was arrested and imprisoned for attempted homicide. Once again, the paternal grandmother took care of the baby. Despite the man being in prison, their relationship continued. During one conjugal visit, Jessica became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. This time, she was able to keep the child. Jessica and her daughter were homeless until an old friend offered them shelter. To support herself, Jessica returned to escort. Jessica then met Dirk Beauchamp, an American who had visited Costa Rica multiple times. He became very attached to her, and they soon moved in together. However, concerns arose when neighbors noticed that Jessica's daughter was being left alone for long periods. Eventually, the couple was evicted and moved to a new home in Matapalo. Jessica's family grew when she had 3 more children. Dirk accepted all 4 children, including Jessica's stepdaughter, and gave them his last name, Beauchamp. The community viewed him as a dedicated father, often seen walking his children to school, taking them to music lessons, and spending afternoons with them in the local plaza. However, Jessica had not changed. She continued to struggle with substance use, leading to noticeable drinking and erratic behavior that concerned neighbors. Meanwhile, the grandmother of her second child filed for child support. Jessica ignored the legal notice and was ultimately imprisoned in 2015 at El Buen Pastor, a women's prison in Costa Rica. While she was in jail, Dirk had to care for all 4 children by himself. Those who knew the family said he faced difficulties and sometimes couldn't provide even basic meals. Social workers from the National Child Welfare Agency came to evaluate the family's situation, but Dirk claimed everything was fine, likely out of fear that the authorities would take the children away. While still in prison, Jessica met a man named Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva. After she was released, she returned home not only pregnant with Michael's child, but also with him by her side. This marked the beginning of a new and tumultuous chapter in Jessica's life. She was open about her relationship with Michael, expressing how deeply in love she was with him, despite their shared struggles with addiction. Michael set up a makeshift living space next to the Beauchamp family home and moved freely between both residences, treating them as one. Even Jessica's mother disapproved of the relationship, which prompted Jessica to cut off all contact with her. Dirk, an older and naturally quiet man who avoids conflict, put up with the situation to remain near his children. He also welcomed Jessica's new baby, her daughter with Michael, into their home. However, as time passed, neighbors started to see a shift in Dirk. His previously warm and lively demeanor diminished. He looked more tired and was visibly affected, both physically and emotionally, by the unstable environment he was living in. On the morning of February 16, 2016 at 8:40 a.m., a social worker from the Costa Rican Social Security Fund arrived at the Beauchamp residence for a routine welfare check. He had visited this home many times to check on the children's health and ensure the family had basic support. However, this time felt different. The house was completely sealed and disturbingly quiet, with vultures circling overhead. Worried, he approached a nearby man who was taking care of livestock and asked if the silence was typical. The man shook his head. The children usually played outside. They moved closer to the fence, and then they heard it, a child crying inside. There were no other sounds, no voices, and no movement. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he quickly called emergency services. When the officers arrived, they heard a child's crying coming from beyond the fence. They shouted, threw stones onto the roof, and tried to get a response from inside, but no one answered. Realizing they couldn't wait any longer, they forced open the outer gate and carefully approached the house. Looking through a window, they saw a young girl crouched on the floor, her clothes dirty. They checked another window, which was swarming with flies, and noticed that her clothing was stained with blood. They used a metal bar to pry open a door, with their weapons ready, unsure if the attacker was still inside. As they moved closer to the child, they saw she had injuries on her head. All she requested was water. They surveyed the area and were horrified to find the mutilated body of an adult male nearby. It was Dirk. The officers moved further into the house. In the first bedroom, they found two bodies under a blood-stained sheet, Jessica and her 6-year-old daughter, both lying in a pool of blood. Disturbed, the officers stepped back and headed to the back of the house, where they heard a baby's cries. In a separate room, they discovered a 6-month-old infant lying alone on a bed. Fortunately, she seemed unharmed, even though they feared the attacker might still be inside. They continued their investigation. In the bathroom, they found the body of the oldest daughter. She was partially undressed and had multiple injuries. There was still one last room to check. Inside, there was more blood, with streaks and splatters leading to an adjacent bathroom. There, they found a boy's body. The house was silent now. No one else was there. The officers radioed their station to report the tragic scene. The little girl, who had been asking for water, finally received a drink. She attempted to sit up, but her injuries made it very difficult for her to move. First responders advised her to stay still, as they understood her injuries were likely more serious than they looked. While authorities gathered evidence and removed bodies from the Beauchamp home, the two young survivors of the tragic event were quickly taken to the hospital. The 4-year-old girl was in critical condition, barely conscious, and had multiple stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, arms, and head. Her 6-month-old sister was stable but severely dehydrated, having gone nearly 48 hours without food or water. Both girls were then transferred to the National Children's Hospital in San Jose for additional treatment. A year later, the police officer who responded to the scene reflected on the experience. There had been signs of trouble before. Jessica had filed a domestic violence complaint against her partner, Michael. Given the chaotic situation at home, Michael, who is 24 years old, became the main suspect in a case involving 5 murders. The bodies were found on February 16th, but forensic evidence indicated that the murders happened 2 days earlier, on the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day. Investigators quickly started to trace Michael's steps. Security footage from a store about 700 meters from his home showed that he visited 3 times that night, purchasing beer, soft drinks, cigarettes, and a phone card. Knowing that Michael could potentially escape the country, Costa Rican authorities issued an international arrest warrant the following day. Michael had a prior history of aggravated theft in Costa Rica. With an extradition request now in place, the search for him intensified. Within 48 hours, Nicaraguan authorities confirmed his arrest. While officials initially credited police efforts for the capture, Michael's father later disclosed that he was the one who turned him in. He claimed that Michael admitted to killing Jessica and the children out of jealousy while under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Despite his father's assertions of remorse, Michael did not display any emotion in the days after his arrest. When he was presented to the media, he appeared emotionless, maintaining a cold demeanor and showing no signs of regret. Michael was detained at the prison in Nicaragua as he awaited his trial. On March 30th, a pre-trial hearing took place, attended by Costa Rican officials. The highlight of this hearing was the expected testimony from Jessica's daughter, the living witness to the massacre, who is only 4 years old. She connected through video from the Children's Hospital in Costa Rica, along with a judge and a psychologist. During her testimony, she clearly identified Michael as the person responsible for the attacks. She recounted how he first stabbed her mother, followed by Dirk, and then her siblings. She described the violent events in disturbing detail, even specifying the body parts where each family member had been injured. Throughout this, Michael remained completely still. Extradition was quickly dismissed as an option. Similar to Costa Rica, Nicaragua's constitution does not allow the extradition of its own citizens for trial in other countries. As a result, Michael's trial would happen in Nicaragua. Costa Rican officials began sending all relevant evidence, witness statements, and investigative documents to their Nicaraguan counterparts to facilitate the legal process. On April 19th, a preliminary hearing was held. The prosecutor presented the charges in distressing detail: 5 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated abuse, and 1 count of endangering a person's safety. On the night of February 14th, the official report states that Michael entered the bedroom where Jessica was sleeping next to her 6-year-old daughter. He was armed with a kitchen knife and stabbed Jessica twice, once in the collarbone and once in the chest. As Jessica fell, the girl tried to help her mother but was attacked by Michael, who stabbed her 5 times in the back. Michael then turned his focus to Dirk, hearing the screams. Dirk grabbed a second kitchen knife to protect his family. However, he could not compete with Michael, who was younger, stronger, and fueled by something evil. Dirk initially sustained minor injuries, but then Michael struck with deadly accuracy. He stabbed Dirk in the left arm, made deep cuts to his neck and side of his head, and delivered 8 brutal blows to his back, another 8 to his chest. In total, Dirk suffered 19 stab wounds that led to his death. Michael's violent rampage turned into a horrific nightmare. He targeted 8-year-old Jessica's son, who tried to escape to his bedroom but was cornered. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, the boy was slashed on the hand. Though he made it to the bathroom, Michael continued to attack, stabbing him 3 times in the back, 7 times in the chest, hitting his lungs and heart. Next, he turned his attention to 12-year-old another girl, who was hiding in a locked room. Michael broke in and stabbed her 3 times in the back before abusing her. The brutality escalated as he struck her 9 times in the head and 5 times in the chest. Afterward, he dragged her body to the bathroom, placed it in the shower, and attempted to wash away the blood. The violence persisted. 4-year-old the girl was hiding behind a door in another room. When Michael discovered her, he pulled her by the hair and slammed her against the wall. Then he used a knife, cutting her head, neck, body, and arms. The child lost consciousness, and Michael thought she was dead. He only spared one child, 6-month-old. The baby has been his biological daughter, which could explain why she was not harmed. As the prosecutors recounted the events in court, the atmosphere was filled with disbelief and sorrow. Everyone, except for Michael, listened intently to the horrific details, while Michael remained expressionless. In the meantime, the bodies of Jessica and her children were returned to her family, with Jessica's mother taking responsibility for their burial. Since U.S. authorities could not find any relatives for Dirk, he was buried next to Jessica and her children, with her family's permission. The 4-year-old girl faced a challenging path to recovery. A stab wound to her skull had left her partially paralyzed on the left side of her body. She was hospitalized for 3 months, and doctors were hopeful about her physical recovery. However, the emotional scars ran much deeper. She had witnessed her family's brutal murder, endured her own vicious attack, and spent 2 days at the scene before being rescued. The hospital staff affectionately called her the Little Champion as she gradually began to regain her smile and mobility. Like her younger sister, she was placed in a caring, temporary home. Authorities began looking into adoption options, considering keeping the sisters together. Jessica's mother sought custody of the girls, but ultimately, in 2018, Costa Rica's Child Welfare Agency decided that separate adoptions would be in the girls' best interests. They concluded that none of Jessica's family members were equipped to address the girls' complex emotional needs. Given Jessica's own difficult upbringing, officials believed they were making the safest choice for their future. The girls' former home, where the massacre occurred, became a grim landmark. It stood silently, serving as a painful reminder of the tragedy. Locals shared stories of strange occurrences there, including sightings of the family's spirits near the site. Meanwhile, legal proceedings for Michael were moving forward. On June 10, 2016, a special hearing took place where he admitted to the killings. His defense team requested lighter sentences in exchange for his confession, but prosecutors sought the maximum penalties: 25 years for Jessica's femicide, 30 years for Dirk's murder, 15 years for the girl's abuse, plus 30 years for her murder, 30 years for the boy's murder, 30 years for the girl's murder, 20 years for the attempted murder of the girl, and 3 years for abandoning infant. In total, they requested a sentence of 183 years. On July 16, 2017, more than a year after the tragic massacre, justice was served when Nicaraguan judge sentenced Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva to 183 years in prison, meeting the prosecution's request. For the first time, Michael reacted by bowing his head and tapping his fingers on the table, likely contemplating the lengthy prison term ahead. However, under Nicaraguan law, the maximum prison sentence is 30 years, which means Michael could be released at the age of 55 unless laws change. The town of Matapalo will always remember the children who once filled their plaza with laughter, music, and kindness. Dirk, the American father, sacrificed everything to protect the children he loved and died alongside them. Following the tragedy, a debate emerged over who was responsible. Was it solely Michael, the decisions made by Jessica, the impact of banned substance and alcohol, or a broader cycle of neglect and violence that spiraled out of control? On December 5, 1975, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a married couple was on their way home from a school basketball game. At around 8:30 p.m., the wife decided to visit her niece, Lindy, who lived nearby. They parked their car near the apartment complex, and she got out to quickly check on her niece, leaving her husband in the car. However, when she reached the apartment, she discovered that the front door was unlocked. Cautiously peering inside, she saw a knocked-over floor lamp and other items scattered around. The disarray of the apartment indicated that a fight had occurred. When she noticed strange stains on the floor resembling blood, she stepped into the living room. What she discovered would haunt her forever. In the center of the room lay Lindy, with a knife stabbed into her throat. Overwhelmed with panic, she ran out of the house and hurried to her car to call the police. The police arrived at the scene and were baffled about who could have had a conflict with the young 19-year-old girl, who had recently gotten married. They wondered what could have led to her brutal murder. Lindy Sue Beekler was born on January 31, 1956. Her parents divorced when she was very young. She was raised by her mother. Her father moved to the suburbs, remarried, and had a son with his new wife, making him Lindy's half-brother. From a young age, Lindy was curious and cheerful. She loved exploring new activities. Lindy participated in the Girl Scouts, went hiking, enjoyed boating, and joined different clubs. Lindy was a positive person who made everyone feel good. Her bright smile encouraged others to smile too. Above all, she treasured her family. One of her favorite things to do was curl up on the couch with her mother. In those moments, she felt like the happiest person alive because her mother was not only a caring parent, but also her best friend. Recently, Lindy had been employed at a flower shop, where her boss and co-workers described her as very hardworking, humble, and somewhat shy. However, once they got to know her better, Lindy revealed her fun side. She had a great sense of humor. Despite this, she preferred not to be the center of attention. Lindy married at a young age despite her insecurities. Her husband, Philip Beekler, was 5 years older than her. They first met when Lindy was visiting her sister. They were instantly attracted to each other. On October 19th, the year before the attack, Lindy and Philip tied the knot. The ceremony was officiated by Philip's grandfather, who blessed their union, saying they were perfect for one another. Philip worked part-time as an agent at a car rental company while studying art at Millersville State College. It appeared he was inspired by his parents. His mother owned an art gallery and was deeply passionate about art. Lindy is just 2 months away from turning 20 and has recently begun to embrace adult life as a married woman. Philip and Lindy were happily living together in their small one-bedroom apartment. However, Lindy felt uneasy being home alone. She never felt safe since they moved in. She constantly sensed that someone was watching her through the sliding glass door, though she couldn't pinpoint anyone specific. Overall, she was simply afraid to be alone in the apartment. In January, they planned to move to a new place in Manor Township. In the evenings, Lindy got home from work a couple of hours before her husband. She would lock the doors and turn on all the lights, carefully listening to every noise. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found that Lindy had been stabbed 19 times. The attack involved 2 different knives. One knife, which the attacker had brought, was never found, while the other knife came from Lindy's kitchen. This kitchen knife was still in her neck when her aunt discovered her. Lindy's body showed 11 stab wounds to her chest and upper abdomen, 5 to her back, and 3 to her neck. One of the stabs had pierced the carotid artery, causing her to bleed to death. Experts noted that Lindy had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she fought fiercely for her life until the very end. The apartment was in chaos, with blood everywhere. It appeared that, after finishing her shift at the flower shop, Lindy had stopped to buy groceries, as bags of food were left on the kitchen table, still unpacked. This indicates that the attack occurred right after she returned home. Several pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene. A shoe print, likely size 10 or 11, was discovered on the kitchen floor. This print suggested that the attacker was likely a large, strong man. Another piece of evidence hinted at a possible motive, although Lindy was fully clothed when found. Detectives suspected she had been abused. Male fluid was discovered on her underwear, which could provide the perpetrator's DNA. However, in 1975, forensic capabilities were limited. Experts could only identify the attacker's blood type and compare it with that of a suspect, but they needed to identify a suspect first. Unfortunately, that was where the evidence trail ended. The police also lacked the perpetrator's fingerprints, as the knife handle found in Lindy's throat was wrapped in a kitchen towel. The news of Lindy's tragic death devastated her family. Relatives called Philip at work, telling him he needed to come home immediately because something had happened to Lindy. As he rushed to their apartment, he feared the worst, but he could never have imagined that his beloved wife had been brutally killed. The police did not allow Philip inside the apartment, leaving him confused about what had happened. They kept him in the hallway until he found out the heartbreaking news that Lindy was dead. Seeing how pale he became, medics gave him a sedative, and the police took him to his mother's house. For about 4 days, Philip felt lost. He couldn't tell whether it was day or night or how much time had passed since the tragedy. He had to sit and wait for answers while the police continued their investigation. Detectives interviewed her co-workers and employer, and none of them noticed anything unusual about her behavior. Lindy went to work at the flower shop in a good mood. That day, she did not appear anxious or scared. There were no dissatisfied customers. Everything was completely normal. Lindy excitedly shared with her colleagues about the Christmas gift she had prepared for her husband. That evening, she calmly got into her car, waved goodbye to her colleagues, and drove home. Unbeknownst to anyone, it would be her last evening alive. Around 5:30 p.m. After work, Lindy went to the car dealership where her husband, Philip, worked to pick up his paycheck. She cashed the check at the bank and then went to a nearby grocery store to buy groceries, filling 4 bags. Afterward, she headed home, parked her car, and began unloading the bags. It seemed likely she would need to make 2 trips. At that moment, someone likely entered her apartment and attacked her. Detectives speculated on this since there were no signs of forced entry, and Lindy was not the kind of person to let a stranger into her home. This led the police to believe that Lindy knew her attacker, felt safe being alone with them. The first person the detectives looked at as a suspect was the victim's husband, Philip. However, the family and friends insisting that Philip and Lindy were a happy couple. Philip deeply loved Lindy and felt incredibly lucky to be dating her. Amazed that someone so beautiful would be interested in him, he said she changed his life for the better by inspiring him to enroll in college and pursue painting. In return, he supported her dream of opening a flower shop. When Lindy was killed, it devastated Philip. He couldn't bear to stay in their apartment, where every corner reminded him of her, so he moved out. Although he had a strong alibi, investigators were slow to clear him as a suspect. Following Lindy's death, Philip felt lost. He wandered the streets for hours, dropped out of college. They had dreamt of finishing their studies, starting a family, and planning their future together. Now, in an instant, all their dreams collapsed, like a sandcastle washed away by the tide. Philip had to completely rebuild his life in light of this tragic reality. The second suspect in the investigation was Bob, Lindy's direct supervisor. His favorable comments and positive evaluations of Lindy took an unexpected turn. The day before her tragic death, Lindy baked him blueberry muffins for his birthday. Bob spoke so highly of her that police began to question whether he had developed an inappropriate attachment. At 35 years old, single, and without an alibi, Bob caught the attention of the authorities, prompting them to scrutinize him more closely. The pressure became overwhelming, leading him to hire a lawyer to safeguard his privacy. Bob passed a lie detector test and fully cooperated with the police. After clearing both Lindy's husband and Bob as suspects, the police interviewed hundreds of people, including friends, family, and acquaintances. Yet they found no one who might have wanted to harm her. Neighbors were also questioned, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that day. The atmosphere in the apartment complex grew tense as residents began purchasing weapons for protection. While violence in other neighborhoods was concerning, the murder of a young woman next door felt particularly alarming. A note from the police was taped to the Beeklers' front door, indicating that it was a crime scene and restricting access for local residents. This served as a constant reminder of the tragedy and the unsettling reality that the killer might still be nearby. The investigation hit a dead end. The only clue from neighbors was a report of an unfamiliar dark-colored car parked outside Lindy's house at the time of her death, with its headlights on. Even if the driver was not involved in the crime, they could have been a witness. However, locating the car proved to be impossible. Neighbors' descriptions varied widely, and no one could recall the license plate number. Meanwhile, the police station was overwhelmed with calls. Although some leads seemed promising, none led to concrete answers, forcing investigators to develop their own theories. One theory suggested that Lindy was being stalked by someone who observed her and her husband's routines, waiting for the right moment to attack. It's possible the intruder entered the apartment while Lindy was unloading groceries, or that it was a burglar who planned to steal valuables, but panicked and assaulted her with a knife when she unexpectedly returned. However, the burglary theory was weak because Lindy's purse, containing her jewelry, was still in the apartment. Additionally, the nature of the abuse assault did not align with typical burglar behavior. The police eventually identified an 18-year-old suspect, who was arrested. He was known for committing terrible acts. He had already attacked 4 women, binding them with their own clothing and stabbing them with a screwdriver. In one instance, when a victim attempted to flee, he chased her in his car and tried to run her over. The location and timing of his crimes made the police suspect his involvement in Lindy's attack. However, investigations revealed he was not connected to that incident, as he was at work that day, supported by multiple colleagues. In December 1976, Lindy's family visited her grave to pay their respects. What they found left them in shock. Someone had vandalized the grave. The headstone was covered in knife marks. Pieces of it were scattered nearby, and the rest was splattered with red spray paint. The police took this incident seriously, as they believed the vandal might have also been involved in Lindy's death. The use of a knife suggested the vandal was aware of how Lindy had died, and notably, only her grave had been targeted in the entire cemetery. Since the family had kept the burial location private, it indicated that the vandal had intentionally sought it out, possibly by following family members. Unfortunately, the detectives were unable to identify the culprit. An entire year went by without any answers, leaving Lindy's family in a state of confusion and distress about what happened to her. In the following years, detectives looked into many people who were connected to Lindy's life. They examined her mother's boyfriend, looked into frequent customers of the flower shop, and even explored possible connections to serial killers active in Pennsylvania at that time. In their search for answers, they even consulted psychics. Despite these efforts, the case of Lindy Beekler's death remained unsolved. 25 years after Lindy's tragic death, the lead detective retired, leaving the Lindy case as one of the oldest unsolved cases in Lancaster County. In 2006, the investigation into Lindy's death was transferred to a special group in Pennsylvania that focused on old unsolved cases, utilizing new techniques and perspectives. However, they too were unable to make any progress. Decades after his wife's death, Philip Beekler discovered the DNA analysis techniques used to convict the perpetrator. He believed these methods could also be applied to his wife Lindy's case. In 2019, police applied these techniques to analyze DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect based on the DNA. A computer program produced 2 portraits. One depicted how the suspect likely appeared at the time of Lindy's attack, and the other showed what the suspect might look like at age 65. While the portraits weren't exact representations, they revealed important details about the suspect, including fair skin, brown eyes, dark hair, and possible distinctive features. Despite this progress, locating the suspect was still difficult. The DNA sample was analyzed by C.C. Moore, a well-known American genetic genealogist. She discovered that the DNA found on the victim's underwear in 1975 was connected to a small town in Italy. Moore invested a lot of time identifying individuals with Italian ancestry who were living in Lancaster County at the time of Lindy's murder. She traced the migration patterns from this small Italian town to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. After ruling out over 2,000 individuals with similar genetic profiles, she was able to use public records to narrow it down to one suspect. This led her to identify the likely killer, a man named David Sinopoli. Investigators checked the name against existing databases, but found no records. This man had never been noticed by the police before, and his name was not on any suspect lists. However, while reviewing the case files, detectives learned that David lived in the same apartment complex as the Beeklers. To establish his connection to Lindy's death, they needed to obtain David's DNA. On February 11, 2022, David was at Philadelphia International Airport waiting for his flight. To pass the time, he bought coffee, not realizing that police were observing him from afar. After David finished his coffee, he threw the empty cup into a trash bin An officer then discreetly collected the discarded cup and placed it in a plastic bag for further examination. The cup was sent to a lab for DNA analysis, which revealed a match between the DNA on the cup and the seminal fluid found on Lindy Beekler's underwear, confirming that David Sinopoli had been at the crime scene. Additionally, 2 drops of blood found on her stockings matched his DNA, providing further evidence. Initially, investigators thought the significant amount of blood at the crime scene belonged to the victim. However, they also considered the possibility that the perpetrator had injured himself and left behind traces of his blood. On July 17, 2022, around 7 a.m., police arrived at David's home, a few miles from the site where Lindy was murdered years earlier. He did not resist arrest, but his wife, who had been married to him for 36 years, was completely shocked. They had 3 children and 9 grandchildren, all of whom were unaware that they had been living with a criminal and murderer. Following the tragic murder of 19-year-old Lindy, David had lived quietly for nearly 47 years, never revealing his past and believing he would escape punishment. After David was arrested, Lindy's family had a reason to celebrate. Unfortunately, many family members never got to see justice served. Lindy's father died in 2000, and her mother followed in 2007. Her husband, Philip, was still alive and had remarried around 1990. Even though he hadn't initially planned to, he wanted to honor Lindy's hopes for him by finishing college, attending graduate school, and becoming an artist, which he accomplished. Eventually, he was able to let go of the tragedy and move forward with his life. The day after David's arrest, the police held a press conference announcing that they considered the case of Lindy Beekler's murder closed. Friends and family of David struggled to believe he was involved, thinking there must have been a misunderstanding. However, it's painful to acknowledge that this man evaded consequences for his actions for nearly 50 years, living as if nothing had happened after taking a young woman's future. Years went by, but the police never forgot about the case and continuously worked to solve it. Eventually, justice was served. David Sinopoli was taken into custody without the option for bail. Initially, he strongly denied any connection to Beekler's death, but as the trial date approached, he changed his mind and agreed to a plea deal. On October 19, 2023, 48 years after the crime, David Sinopoli pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary. He received a prison sentence of 25 to 50 years. The judge mentioned that considering the defendant's age, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. David never explained why he killed Lindy by brutally stabbing her 19 times and violating her body to fulfill his selfish desires. Lindy and David were neighbors in the same apartment complex, but there is no evidence that they ever interacted prior to the crime. This leaves the true motives behind his actions a mystery, even to the police. It's possible that David was strongly attracted to her and eventually succumbed to his hidden urges. His primal instincts took over, which is why he is now in prison. On Valentine's Day in Tijuana, Elizabeth was excited about a second date with a man she had recently met. As usual, she let her family know where she was going, even shared her location for safety. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, her messages suddenly stopped. Her phone went quiet, and her car was missing. By the next morning, her family began searching everywhere for her, hoping to find any clue. What they uncovered shattered their hearts and revealed a more disturbing situation in the city. Elizabeth was not alone. Her case was just the start of a troubling pattern. Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa was born in 1996 in Tijuana, Baja California, a city on the border between Mexico and the United States. She was the youngest of 7 siblings. People who knew her described Elizabeth as a cheerful and gentle young woman who had a strong bond with her mother. Her mother was more than just a mother to her. She was her anchor, confidant, and main source of strength. By early 2022, Elizabeth accomplished something her family had never achieved before. She graduated with a degree in international trade and business from a private university. This was a significant milestone, But it didn't satisfy her ambitions. She aspired to pursue a master's degree to create more opportunities for herself and her family. While planning her educational journey, Elizabeth also managed a small clothing business. To boost her income, she worked as a dancer in a bar located in Zona Norte, a popular nightlife area for both tourists and locals. Like many women in her situation, Elizabeth was careful. She kept her family updated, especially when meeting clients. She shared her location, maintained communication, and trusted her instincts. This cautious habit would later play a crucial role in the effort to track her last movements. On February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, Elizabeth seemed excited. She had lunch with her mother that afternoon, which turned out to be their last meal together. Later that evening, she had a second date with a man she had recently met at work. He was American. Elizabeth confided in her brother, expressing that while she was uncertain about him, her curiosity led her to give him another chance. Staying true to her usual habits, she promised to keep in touch, send updates, and share her location. Some reports indicate they met again at a bar, while others suggest she picked him up near a border crossing in her white SUV. They went to a Brazilian restaurant for dinner and then drove to a motel close to the beaches of Tijuana. Elizabeth informed her family that she would be gone for no more than 4 hours. At the start of the night, everything appeared normal. She kept sending her location, and her messages reassured her family about her safety. They knew where she was and who she was with. However, then the updates suddenly stopped. There were no more messages, no answered calls, and no signs that she was moving. This silence was not just worrisome, it was overwhelming. Her family's anxiety grew rapidly. The lack of communication was completely out of character for someone as careful and responsible as Elizabeth. It quickly became a clear sign that something was seriously wrong. As the hours went by, the feeling of dread intensified, marking the onset of a nightmare that no one was ready to face. When hours went by without any news of Elizabeth, her family didn't hesitate to take action. That same night, filled with fear and uncertainty, they started searching for her on their own. Their first stop was the bar where she worked, but the response they received was shocking. Elizabeth had not come in that day. Her concerned co-workers provided the family with an important lead, a detailed description of the man she was supposed to meet. They described him as overweight, with light brown skin and visible acne scars. He was a frequent customer at the bar, and although he didn't have a name, the description was detailed enough to help the family in their search. By February 15th, the family was increasingly worried due to the lack of news about Elizabeth. They decided to report her disappearance to local authorities, but encountered a common hurdle: bureaucracy. They were informed that they had to wait 24 hours before they could file an official report. Determined not to delay, they took to social media, creating pages, sharing photos, and soliciting the public's help. Despite their efforts, it felt as though Elizabeth and her white Jeep Liberty had completely disappeared. On February 16th, authorities officially expanded the report to include her missing vehicle. GPS tracking of Elizabeth's phone showed her movements, first to a Brazilian restaurant near the river, then to a motel, and finally to a park. The last recorded location was a downtown hotel in Tijuana. Her brother hurried there, but hotel staff denied him entry, and there was still no sign of Elizabeth or her Jeep. On Thursday, February 17th, her family used the vehicle's GPS history to track it to a street in Zona Norte. A sense of dread settled over them. Something was definitely wrong. Elizabeth's mother and brother drove directly to the location. Although the Jeep was there, Elizabeth was not. They called the police, and officers and firefighters arrived within minutes to secure the area. Their attention quickly turned to the trunk of the vehicle. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears of Elizabeth's family. Her lifeless body was inside, naked and curled up in a fetal position, exhibiting clear signs of violence. The heartbreaking scene devastated her family, leaving them in shock and disbelief. Elizabeth's family spoke out about her murder, the silence and inaction that preceded it. They highlighted a system that failed to respond when she went missing and the long wait for justice. The story quickly gained attention and sparked outrage throughout the city. Friends, co-workers, even strangers gathered at the scene. Elizabeth's body was taken to the forensic medical service for a complete autopsy. The findings were troubling. She had multiple blunt force injuries on her face, chest, and abdomen. A deep mark on her neck indicated an attempted strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of asphyxiation due to blockage of both her mouth and nose. Forensic experts determined that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. The investigation did not provide any information on possible abuse assault. Nonetheless, the case is officially categorized as a femicide, and an investigation is underway to find her murderer. The tragedy continued for the family after Elizabeth's passing. Just 3 days later, her mother suffered a sudden heart attack and died. Although the official cause was cardiac failure, many believed it was due to overwhelming grief that her body could not bear. As the family laid both mother and daughter to rest, the investigation picked up speed. Local and state authorities began to connect Elizabeth's case with others in the area. A frightening realization surfaced. This was not an isolated incident. The method of killing shared unsettling similarities with 2 other cases of young women who also worked in nightlife scene in Zona Norte. Karen, a 28-year-old mother from Veracruz, went missing on August 30th, 2021 after meeting a man at a motel. 3 days later, her body was discovered in a local garbage dump, showing obvious signs of violence. Karen had recently started working as a dancer and escort. She was careful about her safety, only meeting clients through direct phone calls. Before she left that day, she informed both a friend and a relative about her plans. Despite their quick efforts to find her, the situation ended in tragedy. Security cameras recorded the vehicle used by the man she met, and a friend later identified him from the video. However, surprisingly, no arrest warrant was issued, and the man remained at large. Angela Carolina Acosta Flores was only 20 years old when she was found dead in a hotel room on January 24, 2022, near the bar where Elizabeth worked. Like Elizabeth and Karen, Angela had gone to meet a man described as American and possibly of Hispanic descent. Her phone was missing from the crime scene, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been taken to Riverside, California, across the border. This discovery alarmed the investigators. 3 women had been brutally murdered, all linked by time, location, and method. Each case involved a mysterious man, likely American, and all 3 women were associated with the nightlife in the same area. They were killed within a 6-month period, leading to a troubling conclusion. There may be a serial killer targeting vulnerable women in Zona Norte. On Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the Baja California State Prosecutor held a highly anticipated press conference. With a room full of reporters and the nation watching, he confirmed a troubling presence. A serial killer was active in Tijuana. The prosecutor revealed that the suspect specifically targeted exotic dancers and escort who belonged to one of the city's most at-risk groups. His method was alarming. He would travel from the United States into Mexico, commit his crimes, and then escape back across the border, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. At that time, no additional details were shared to avoid compromising the investigation or alerting the suspect. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the killer was intensifying. Nearly a month later, on December 13th, the prosecutor held a second press conference. This time, the news was shocking. They had identified a suspect, an American citizen, whose psychological profile resembled that of Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers from the 1970s. However, there was a complication. The man had already left Mexico. Although a local arrest warrant was issued, it wasn't sufficient. Authorities sought a red notice from Interpol to enhance international cooperation. The FBI and U.S. consulates joined the search, and the suspect's physical description was made public to help locate him. Experts also conducted new forensic tests to ensure that no accomplices were missed. The breakthrough in the investigation came from detailed profiling. Investigators identified the man's methods. He targeted young women who were petite, attractive, and vulnerable. He portrayed himself as polite, respectful, and generous to gain their trust and lower their defenses. Once he had their confidence, he would lure them to secluded areas where he would then attack them. Each of the 3 known victims, Elizabeth Martinez, Karen, and Angela Carolina Acosta Flores suffered extreme violence, with visible injuries primarily to their faces and chests. His method of asphyxiation was a defining characteristic. Two of the victims were found without clothes, while the third, although still dressed, had more injuries, indicating she may have fought back. This was not a crime of passion. It was deliberate, predatory, and systematic. Although these three cases gained media attention, they were not isolated. At the time of Elizabeth's disappearance, there were already rumors about other missing women with similar ages, professions, and unfortunate outcomes. Their stories have quietly faded away without resolution. As the investigation progressed, authorities were under pressure to act quickly. Although the suspect's identity remained confidential, local media labeled him as the Ted Bundy of Tijuana. His actual name was Bryant Rivera, a U.S. citizen with several known addresses in Southern California. Authorities searched these locations, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members described Bryant as working in e-commerce. Meanwhile, the Elizabeth's family was actively seeking justice for her. On February 14, 2023, marking 1 year since her murder, they revisited the site where her body was discovered and placed a floral tribute in the shape of a heart. Her brother spoke to reporters, expressing his deep sorrow and anger. A year had passed, and Bryant remained at large. The family's lawyer had been denied access to the case details, and the prosecutor's office had not provided any updates. Additionally, Elizabeth's Jeep Liberty, which was part of the crime scene, had yet to be returned. On July 6, 2023, Bryant was arrested in Los Angeles. The arrest took place calmly at his parents' home. However, he was only charged with the murder of Angela Carolina, while the murders of Karen and Elizabeth were not included in the U.S. charges, even though Mexico had made an active extradition request for all three cases. The Baja California prosecutor publicly confirmed Bryant's arrest, stating it was a result of collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Bryant was assigned a public defender and requested bail. The judge denied the bail request, citing concerns about Bryant being a flight risk and a potential danger to women. He was ordered to remain in custody at Los Angeles County Jail. His family firmly rejected all allegations against him. His mother claimed he could never commit such acts of violence, and his sister even wrote a letter to support his character. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. On June 29, 2023, a federal judge in Los Angeles approved Mexico's request to extradite him. Family members of Angela were present at the hearing, along with the brother of Elizabeth. The courtroom was heavy with the sorrow of three grieving families. The judge emphasized that Bryant would remain in custody. As of June 2025, the extradition process is still ongoing. Legal experts estimate it could take up to 2 years to complete. If convicted of all three murders, Bryant could potentially face a total of 180 years in prison. However, due to Mexican law, the maximum sentence he could actually serve is 50 years. In addition, Mexican prosecutors have suggested that Bryant might be connected to a fourth victim, prompting them to investigate unsolved cases of missing women. Investigators are also re-examining surveillance footage from hotels and motels to determine if this predator has been active for a longer period than initially suspected. The situation surrounding Elizabeth has evolved from a personal tragedy to a representation of a larger national issue. Her death, along with the deaths of Karen and Angela, underscores the serious stigma and disregard that women in the escort industry encounter. When Elizabeth went missing, authorities did not intervene. Instead, it was her family who located her. It was her online activity, rather than official procedures, that ultimately pointed to her killer. Even now, despite an arrest, justice has not been achieved. The murder of Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa is a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women in Tijuana's nightlife and the devastating consequences of a system that too often fails them. Her vibrant spirit, her dreams of a brighter future, and her deep bond with her family were cruelly extinguished, leaving a void that echoes through her community. The cases of Elizabeth, Karen, and Angela reveal a chilling pattern of violence that demands urgent action. As Bryant Rivera's extradition process drags on, Elizabeth's family and countless others continue their relentless pursuit of justice. refusing to let her story fade into silence. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, but a rallying cry to confront the stigma, neglect, and impunity that perpetuate such crimes. On January 27, 2017, Cariaga family's peaceful evening in Kitsap County, Washington ended in tragedy when their house caught fire. Upon investigation, authorities discovered 3 bodies inside, all victims of gunshot wounds before the fire was started. 2 days later, another member of the Cariaga family was found shot and burned in his truck deep in the woods. This was not a random act. Someone was determined to eliminate this family. But who were they? And what were they trying to conceal? The Cariaga family appeared to be a typical close-knit blended family. At the center was John Derek Cariaga, 43, recognized by many in the community for his keen business acumen and generous nature. His wife, Christelle Lynn Cariaga, 37, brought happiness and warmth to everyone around her. Together, they built a stable home and a successful business. John and Christelle married in 2009, each bringing a son from previous relationships into their new family. 16-year-olds Jonathan Higgins and Hunter Schaap brought laughter, energy, and a touch of typical teenage chaos to their home. They were very close, almost like brothers. Outside of their home, the Cariagas were doing well. Christelle operated a popular coffee stand called Christelle's Java Hut, and she and John co-owned Juanito's Taco Shop, a much-loved Mexican restaurant in nearby Bremerton. Their reputation in the local business community was strong. To outsiders, they seemed to be a perfect family, living a happy life. However, underneath this seemingly ideal image, serious issues were developing, issues that went unnoticed by their customers, neighbors, and even their closest friends. It began like any other Friday night. Christelle was hosting friends for what seemed to be a simple, enjoyable gathering. Inside, people chat and relax after a long day. Meanwhile, John was also at home, but his evening changed when he received an urgent phone call. He let his family know he needed to step out briefly to meet someone and promised to return quickly. However, when John returned, he did not come inside. Instead, he remained in the garage. Noticing something was wrong, one of the guests went to check on him. What they overheard was alarming. 3 men were speaking loudly and appeared to be in a heated argument. This unsettling conversation, heard from the darkness of the garage, became the last clue before the night took a tragic turn. As chaos erupted, a frantic call came into Bremerton's emergency dispatch center. On the line was 16-year-old Hunter Schaap. Terrified and pleading for help, he explained that he and his family had been shot, urgently requested assistance. However, before he could provide more details, the call abruptly disconnected. What followed was horrifying. In a final act of brutality, Hunter was smothered with a pillow and then shot in the head. When first responders arrived, the flames devoured the Cariaga home, which had once been a place filled with love and life. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Christelle, Hunter, Jonathan, 3 lives extinguished in an instant. It was a deliberate, brutal act, and merely a part of a much larger tragedy. 2 days later, a grim discovery was made in a remote area of Mason County, nestled within a quiet tree farm near Belfair. Inside a burned Ford F-150 pickup, the remains of John Cariaga were found. He had been shot, his truck set on fire, and his body left in the woods. A caretaker at the property mentioned something unusual. John had been seen on the land that same day, but he wasn't driving his truck at the time. Combined with details of a conversation John had with 3 men earlier, this raises many questions. Who were the 3 men seen in the garage? The detectives discovered something unexpected. Days after the quadruple murders, more than $50,000 was found in a safe under the master bedroom bed, and $7,000 was found in a bank bag in a closet. Marijuana plants were found in a garage. The killers hadn't taken a single penny, which meant robbery wasn't the motive. Complicating matters further, according to the Kitsap County Fire Marshal's office, Firewood, possibly laced with some type of fire accelerant, was placed in beds at opposite ends of the house after Christelle, Hunter, and Jonathan were all dead. Large rocks were then thrown through the windows of the house to further fuel the fire, suggesting the goal was to completely destroy the Cariaga family. As investigators looked closer, a darker reality began to unfold. This is when John's double life came to light. This wasn't merely a random act of violence or a disastrous family feud. Law enforcement revealed that while John managed a family business during the day, he secretly engaged in a high-risk operation, smuggling and selling cocaine, allegedly bringing back kilos from California every few months to distribute in Kitsap County. Some of the people buying cocaine from John were members of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. This life may have ultimately led to his family's tragic fate. An important detail was overlooked. A neighbor of the Cariagas heard gunshots at the house on the day of the murder and reported seeing John Cariaga's truck speed away, with Kelly, a friend of John's, at the wheel and another vehicle closely following behind. Nearly a year after the murder, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office said Danny J. Kelly Jr. has been identified as a suspect. In January 2018, the Sheriff's Office released surveillance images of Kelly in a Target store from more than a week before the murders. In the store, he was seen wearing clothing associated with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In January 2020, FBI detectives and agents announced that Kelly and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club were directly involved in the Cariaga family murders. Detectives working with FBI agents developed a chilling theory. This was not an isolated incident, but a targeted hit orchestrated by members and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In their world, loyalty is paramount, and betrayal, whether real or imagined, can have deadly consequences. Although the Bandidos claim they are not a criminal organization, the facts suggest otherwise. Members of the club have faced convictions for various crimes. The range of criminal activities associated with them is extensive and alarming, including racketeering, running illegal businesses, banned substance and arms trafficking, assault, money laundering, loan sharking, contract killings, trafficking stolen goods, motor vehicle theft, and counterfeiting. In Washington state, the Bandidos Motorcycle Gang has 14 chapters, is heavily involved in methamphetamine trafficking and violent crime. In 1985, law enforcement conducted a major operation against the Bandidos, arresting 13 members on banned substance and weapon charges in cities like Bellingham, Everett, and Puyallup. This operation was the result of a 16-month investigation involving the FBI, DEA, and ATF, showcasing the seriousness of law enforcement's efforts to combat their criminal activities. The gang's violent nature is evident from a deadly shootout in 2000 between the Bandidos and a rival gang, the Iron Horsemen, at a motorcycle rally. In this conflict, one Bandidos member was killed, another was injured, and a member of the rival gang suffered critical injuries. This altercation was rooted in a banned substance dispute, indicating that the gang's conflicts frequently escalate into violence. In 2005, the criminal activities of the Bandidos were closely examined when 32 members and associates from Washington and Montana faced serious charges. During subsequent raids, law enforcement seized banned substance, firearms, stolen motorcycles, and a significant amount of cash. Many members, including top leaders like the international president and chapter presidents, pleaded guilty. Although there were convictions, some sentences were unexpectedly lenient, and a few members were permitted to remain associated with the club under strict court oversight. Now, let's focus on John's connection to the club. One of Johnny Cariaga's close friends started selling the cocaine he transported from California to Robert Bobby Watson III, a fully patched member of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. It is unknown whether Watson had purchased the cocaine for his own personal use or to resell and profit off of. The friend of John's eventually decided to put a stop to selling, placing John into direct communication with Bobby Watson III as a subsequent result. When John would end up taking his routine trip down to California after this incident, Watson would follow closely behind him, ultimately causing an intense verbal argument between both men. Whatever took place during that confrontation set off a series of events that led to John's entire family being killed just weeks later. The key question now is, was John the only target, or was this assassination meant to make a statement to others as well? Known as Bobby to his friends, Watson was not just a hot-tempered biker. He was the vice president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club's Bellingham chapter and, according to police, the suspected planner of the Cariaga family massacre. What made the situation even more frightening was Bobby's behavior after the murders. When other Bandidos members questioned him about his involvement, Bobby gave vague answers, avoided direct questions, and provided conflicting accounts of what happened. It seemed as though he either couldn't keep his story straight or didn't care to. Even though Bobby had a high position in the Bandidos, not all members agreed with the violence that occurred. The chapter president publicly denounced the killings, particularly the horrific murders of women and children. He even worked with investigators, stating that there is a clear line between loyalty to the gang and pure brutality. In the biker community, the rules can be unclear, but murdering an entire family was seen as crossing a serious line, even among criminals. Then there was Johnny James Watson, Bobby's younger brother from Bellingham. Johnny was not a member of the Bandidos and, according to available records, had no direct involvement in the gang's illegal activities. However, being Bobby Watson's brother made him a suspect by default. Questions arose. What did he know? What had he heard? And most importantly, what part, if any, did he play in these events? One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this story involves Danny J. Kelly Jr. Although Kelly was not an official member of the Bandidos, he was very much involved. As a hang-around, he was seen as a prospective member eager to earn his place in the group. With Bobby Watson being his connection to the inner circle, Kelly often wore Bandidos supporter gear and openly expressed his ambitions. However, what makes his story particularly tragic is that years prior, Kelly was among John Cariaga's closest friends. In fact, John chose him to be the best man at his wedding. It was a friendship that should have lasted forever, but things took a wrong turn. Their bond fell apart when John accused Kelly of stealing from him, an accusation that shattered any remaining trust. After years of diligent investigation, the details of the Cariaga family case finally came together, leading law enforcement to establish a special task force dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the brutal quadruple murder. This was not just another forgotten cold case. It became an urgent mission aimed at bringing the perpetrators to justice for the pain they inflicted. The evidence mounted, and eventually 3 men, Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson, and Johnny James Watson, who were believed to have planned and carried out the attack, were arrested. Their names, once merely whispered in private conversations, now resonated throughout the Kitsap County Jail. Even while in custody, they maintained their innocence against a long list of serious felony charges, including aggravated murder, arson, and burglary. Each faced the looming threat of 16 felony counts hanging over them like a sword on a thread. A judge, understanding the seriousness of their alleged offenses and the danger they posed, denied bail for all 3. They were also prohibited from having firearms, alcohol, or banned substance unless prescribed for medical reasons. To avoid any potential coordination among them, the court prohibited contact between the men. It was evident that the system was intent on keeping them apart, isolated, and closely monitored until justice could prevail. In April 2024, a long and intense trial concluded with a verdict that brought closure to a troubling chapter in Kitsap County's history. The court found Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson III, and Johnny James Watson guilty on 30 charges, including first-degree murder, premeditated murder, and arson. The severity of their crimes, including the brutal killings and the intentional destruction of a family home, left no room for leniency. As the courtroom prepared for sentencing, the atmosphere was filled with deep sadness as the victims' loved ones came forward to share their memories and grief. Carly Schaap, the mother of Hunter Schaap, made a poignant statement by placing an urn with her son's ashes next to a photo of him at the lectern. 8 relatives, all deeply affected by their loss, addressed the court, reminiscing about their loved ones while pleading with the judge for the harshest possible sentences for the men convicted. Carly and other family members openly expressed the ongoing pain and suffering that have impacted their blended family since that tragic night on January 27, 2017. On May 7, 2024, the court sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They would have no chance of freedom. The Cariaga killers would spend the rest of their lives behind bars, held responsible for devastating a family and tearing apart a community. For the investigators who had followed leads, faced setbacks, and pieced together evidence, this outcome was a hard-earned success. It served as a somber reminder of the consequences of violence, but also affirmed that justice, though slow, ultimately prevails. To make matters worse, in another incident, in 2018, they suffered another blow when Joseph Carrega, a young family member, died in a car crash near Huntsville. This additional loss deepened the sorrow and pain already weighing heavily on their hearts. The tragic story of the Cariaga family is a haunting reminder of how deep pain can ripple far beyond the immediate loss, touching the lives of loved ones and entire communities. What was a quiet life ended in unimaginable violence, fueled by a dark underworld that most would rather not see. Even as justice was served with life sentences, the shadows left behind linger. As the dust settles, it leaves you wondering how many more lives are quietly caught in the crossfire of secrets and violence that we may never fully understand.
Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Zara Alina. Zara was born in the UK in the winter of 1986. She was the first of 5 children born to a young single mother who lived with her own parents. The family had immigrated from Pakistan in 1968. Zara grew up in a close-knit, multi-generational household. Although they didn't have much money, her family placed a strong emphasis on education and was committed to ensuring Zara had everything she needed to lead a fulfilling life, including love, support, and a good education. During her childhood, Zara enjoyed dancing and swimming. She aspired to become a lawyer. She had a friendly nature and a cheerful spirit. As a teenager, she had the opportunity to travel around England and visit museums and galleries. These experiences expanded to trips throughout Europe. After graduating from high school, Zara enrolled in law school at the University of Westminster. She showed a passionate and determined spirit. Her commitment to justice was evident in the auditorium, where she actively supported refugees fleeing violence. She also volunteered at soup kitchens for the homeless. Those who knew Zara said she left a trail of joy wherever she went. She was also very hardworking and managed to cover all her own expenses. In fact, she worked as a salesperson at a local clothing store and was well acquainted with everyone in the area, from teenagers to seniors. She greeted everyone with kindness and was always willing to help. Sometimes, she uses her money to take stray cats to the vet, care for them at home, and encourage neighbors to adopt them. An important person in Zara's life is her friend Cassie Peters. They visit each other regularly or talk on the phone almost every day. By 2002, after passing her exams and completing her first year, Zara was offered a job at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a crucial step towards becoming a fully fledged solicitor, a goal she was determined to achieve. On her first day, she took a cheerful selfie and sent it to friends and family. At 35, Zara got a new job, which further strengthened her confidence in her plans to start a family soon. Near her home lived a man named Jordan McSweeney. Jordan was several years younger than her. At the age of 13, he had already faced charges in a youth court in Kent for various offenses committed between 2006 and 2009. In August 2010, when he was 17, he was convicted of assaulting a girl, which resulted in her having a swollen eye. For this, he received a 4-month community service order. 11 years later, he assaulted another woman and was given a 3-year community service order. By the start of the 2020s, Jordan was 28 years old. Jordan has a troubling history, with convictions for 9 offenses, including theft, assaulting police and the public, vehicle theft, traffic violations, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. On his profile on a popular social media platform, he boasted about owning many knives and promoted his criminal lifestyle through photos and quotes. He even shared fake wanted posters claiming he was being sought by the FBI. After serving time for criminal damage, racially aggravated stalking, and illegal possession of a knife, he was released on June 17, 2022. After his release, Jordan violated all terms of his agreement and missed 2 consecutive appointments with his probation officer. As a result, police revoked his benefits and began the process of revoking his parole, with the intention of sending him back to prison on June 22, 2022. 2 days later, on June 25, police went to Jordan's mother's house to arrest him but found he was not there. That night, Zara had planned to meet a friend, after speaking to her aunt on the phone and mentioning her plans to go out. Her aunt advised her to stay safe, but Zara reassured herself that she would not be going far from home and felt confident in the safety of the route she was taking, as she was very familiar with the area. Zara then met her friend at a local bar called the Big Spoon in Ilford, a vibrant and diverse area in London's West End, ideal for dinner and conversation. The girls went to the bar before going to another nearby venue. In the bar, Zara only drinks water, not alcohol. By this time, Jordan had had several drinks at other nightclubs. He had a disturbing idea in mind and was determined to carry it out. He planned to find a woman to attack that night. Surveillance footage captured him at the bar entrance, where he was seen hugging women without their consent and trying to kiss them. He was particularly aggressive towards one of the staff, despite her clearly feeling uncomfortable, and he was eventually kicked out of the bar after 11 p.m. His inappropriate behavior was recorded by security cameras as he left. While walking along Fort Street towards the park, he noticed a woman hurrying by and began to follow her closely. Despite her attempts to evade him, he was outside waiting when she entered a store. After she carefully exited, Jordan trailed her again. However, when the woman finally entered her home, Jordan had to move on. At around 2 a.m., when the streets were fairly deserted, Jordan saw another woman walking. Surveillance footage shows him quickly approaching her, but 2 passers-by noticed something was wrong and helped the woman get home safely. Meanwhile, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar at 2 a.m. The friend took a taxi, but Zara, thinking the distance was short and the weather was nice, opted to walk. She headed to Cranbrook Street, which was well lit and about a 10-minute walk from her home. It was then that Jordan spotted her. Jordan followed Zara for approximately 800 meters before seizing her. He approached her from behind, covered her mouth with one hand, and started to strangle her with the other before dragging her into a wooded path. There, he sexually assaulted and violently beat her. Jordan then returned home at around 2:30 a.m. On June 26, 2022, Zara was found on the pavement in Ilford, with her belongings scattered along the pavement. She was brutally beaten, partially stripped of her clothes and lying on the side of the road. A passerby performed CPR until an ambulance arrived, but sadly, Zara died in hospital at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. During this time, Jordan was captured on the park's security camera. Police visited Zara's grandmother to ask her to identify her granddaughter in the bar's security camera footage. After she confirmed it was Zara, police explained to her what had happened. Later, the police conducted a thorough investigation in the area where Zara was found, collecting surveillance camera footage to track the movements of her attacker. This investigation, along with bloody fingerprints found near the scene, led them to identify Jordan as the suspect. They tracked his location using surveillance cameras and obtained images of the prime suspect. Police then arrested Jordan as he slept in his trailer. He did not resist arrest. Inside his trailer, police found blood-stained clothing and shoes. Despite hours of questioning, he remained silent. The crime prompted probation officer Justin Russell to point out several mistakes the probation department made in handling Jordan's case. He noted that Jordan had been a felon for 16 years, both in prison and after his release, which classified him as a dangerous offender. However, he did not receive the appropriate level of supervision. Had more drastic measures been taken, he could have been sent back to prison after missing scheduled meetings with his probation officer. September 30th was set for the trial, but it was postponed. Zara's family then held a vigil in her memory, along the route she was supposed to take home, symbolizing her unfinished journey. Many people dressed in white to attend the vigil. The event was attended by more than 120 organizations dedicated to women's rights and the fight against violence. During a preliminary hearing at East London Crown Court, forensic scientist Nadia Perso said that local police could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Nadia believed that the case deserved more media attention and suggested that the inquest should also consider the actions of prison staff and probation officers. Nadia estimated that the inquest would take about a month. On November 16, 2022, Jordan did not attend the hearing, despite being told he needed to attend via video link. However, he later pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow described him as unfit for bail, a view supported by Judge Chima Grove. Sentencing was adjourned until December 14, 2022. Jordan McSweeney was sentenced to 33 years in prison for the murder of Zara Alina. Jordan and his representatives appealed the verdict, but the sentence was upheld at 33 years.